Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching third part of What If Naruto Has a Broken Dojutsu. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As you all know, Sarutobi began to address the group of Junin in his office. It's time for our twice yearly chunin exam. If any of you want to let your genin in, all they have to do is stand. Because of yesterday, Kakashi and Yamato had been arguing a lot about whether or not they should join their team. The group was stronger than the average genin team, but Naruto and Sakura were new bloodline users who didn't have a clan to teach them. Naruto was especially new and wasn't sure what he could do yet. They would still have a good time no matter what. Hitaki Kakashi, choose Team 7 for the test, the Scarecrow said as he stood up. As the Mokuton user joined the man in the mask, he said, as secondary team captain, I second that idea. That wasn't going to go over with Maida Guy. He would let his students in too if his rival was going to do it. Maida Guy, the Green Beast yelled as he always did, nominate Team 9 for the Chunin exam. Sarutobi Asuma, the heavy smoker said to join in, nominate Team 10. Kurenai also stood up and said, I'm going to do the same. I nominate Team 8 for the exam. Everyone raised an eyebrow when the senior ninjas heard that 3 rookie teams were going to the Chunin exams, which no one in their right mind would do. Saruto even followed the crowd, which caught them off guard. The test this year looked like it would be really fun to watch, especially since Naruto was going to be there. Are you sure that's smart, Kakashi? Everyone turned to see where the voice was coming from and saw Mitarashi Anko leaning on the doorway with her arms crossed. Do you really think your team is ready? I know this exam inside and out and it's never pretty. The man with silver hair knew where she was leading him. He knew how close the woman and Naruto got, so it wasn't a surprise that there was worry about them. Things got even worse when the Kyokugen came into the picture. She had every reason to be worried, but his team needed the experience. Anko's worry about a certain team and advice to them to stop also caught Kurenai off guard. It's more likely that the crazy woman would love the chance to mess around with a group of newbies. To be honest, she was sure that Aruka, not the psychopath, would be the first to try to stop a rookie team from taking the test. Kakashi said, you surprise me, in his usual lazy way. I thought for sure you'd enjoy it. I have my reasons, the woman with purple hair said. Yes, I think you do, the man said in a firm voice, but they're my team and I make the calls. Also, you should have more faith in them. They're very capable. As Anko pushed harder, she knew she was up against a wall and things were only going to get worse. Already, the thought of her fake little brother getting hurt made her angry, and she couldn't even begin to picture how angry Aruka would get when he found out about this. Your funeral, she said in a low voice that the Kakashi could hear. As soon as Kakashi heard that, he knew he had really messed things up with Aruka. Even though there wasn't a cloud in the sky, lightning bolts from a nearby training area were putting on an epic light show over Konoha. You could get a better look at what was going on and see a man with silver hair and wide eyes running around while dodging the crazy electricity coming from a man with scars and hair that looked like a pineapple. 2 other Junin, one a woman and the other a man with a headpiece, watched the story. The man watching looked a little amused, but the woman had an angry look on her face that made it look like she wanted the victim to get severely electrocuted. Aruka yelled, you idiot, do not give them those forms. Which let his Hyakurai go free. Even though the man was usually calm, Kakashi knew that when he got angry, he could be very dangerous, especially when Naruto's safety was involved. Could I please explain? Kakashi asked as he dove to avoid a lightning bolt that was too close. For the copycat Sake, Aruka yelled, you got 5 seconds. And held back his limit. Kakashi said, I'm doing this to give my team some experience. He was trying very hard not to step on any thin ice, or in this case, a set of hanging power lines. You know as well as I do it'd be good for them to see other ninja and not just keep doing these missions. It'll give them a reason to get stronger. What about Naruto? Aruka asked with his eyes getting narrow. If any ninja from another country finds out about the Kyokugen, a lot of things could happen. It's too risky. Yes, I agree, the Junin with silver hair said, taking a cautious step back. But Naruto would also be able to copy many more bloodlines at the same time. That would only make him stronger. Besides, if anyone finds out. He quickly moved out of the way as another lightning strike hit the spot where he had been standing. His one eye was about the size of a dinner plate. Even though Kakashi wasn't sure, he had a strong feeling that the bolt was aimed at his private parts. If anyone finds out, Aruka finished for him, sending a huge amount of chakra into the air as his temper began to boil over. The fourth great shinobi war could start. Other countries will want to kidnap him too much, and I'm not going to let anyone get close to him. He does have a point, Yamato said with his index finger raised in the air, which caught everyone's attention. Think about it for a minute. Naruto adapts. It may seem like something simple at first glance, but the way he's learning the bloodline limits, it's at a speed that none of us could have dreamed. His Hyouden is already at a high level as it is already. Why not throw a couple more things out there for him to grasp? Aruka took his time going over what he had heard. Okay, Yamato made a point. Naruto learned limits so quickly and easily that he was like a sponge. There were so many people his age who couldn't keep up with his growth rate that they were having trouble. Kakashi stood nearby, tense and ready to avoid another lightning bolt just in case. Lightning might be fast, but a copycat that was being chased by that source of energy was faster, especially when it came to a part of his body that was at stake. He still wasn't sure, but he was willing to bet Guy that Aruka was going after his testicles. She finally let out a sigh of defeat after what seemed like an eternity in Shingami's stomach. It looked like the scarecrow was about to take it easy when the teacher walked up to him with a scary smile on his face, which made Anko proud. Aruka gave him his warning when he walked up to him, which made the man with silver hair shiver. If he gets a single scratch, I will not kill you. Instead I will grab your head and send every voltage my body can create through your face, and after I'm done with you, not even your mask will keep your face from melting off your head. Anko smiled like a Cheshire cat when she heard a warning that made her so proud. Aruka was really starting to take after her. Yamato, on the other hand, did nothing but sigh. When dealing with other ninjas who thought the blonde was their brother or sister, this is what happened. Both of them would have done anything to protect their little brother, even if it meant torturing the jerk who was so stupid as to hurt him. Before getting his ramen, Naruto sat at Ichiraku's and thought about what he had seen with Gara earlier that day. Jikaiden. It was strong, maybe even stronger than Hyakuri when it was fully released. Ice and wood were strong and had strengths that other elements didn't have, but magnetism was so much better that it was funny. Here you go, Naruto, Ayame told him as she served him his usual big-sized bowl of his favorite comfort food. How you've been lately? The sun. Kissed boy broke off his chopsticks and took a few test bites of his food. Pretty good, he said. That's good, Ayame said as she leaned against the counter. I'm glad to see that so many people are now looking out for you. He put down his food to think about what she said. It was real. So many more people had become important to him since he was at the academy. Yukio, Anko, Kakashi, Sasaki and Sakura, and Haku when he was still alive. The sad smile on his face showed that he knew things were slowly going to change. He said as he ate his ramen, yeah, I guess you're right. When he didn't behave at the table, Ayame shook her head and went back into the restaurant to help her dad. He was almost done with his second bowl when it hit him. His Kyokugen grabbed a signature nearby and was getting ready to walk by. He turned around in his seat to try to figure out if it was someone he knew or someone he had never met before. Not Jikaiden. Gara felt a strong desire to kill mixed in with the feeling. In fact, he had never felt anything like it before. After a short time, the crowds moved out of the way of his view, revealing a scene that made him gasp so hard that all of his ramen noodles fell out. Along with a female Junin he couldn't place, the owner of the limit was walking with two of his classmates, whom he recognized as Shino and Kiba. She was about the same height as him, had skin as white as chalk, and wore a jacket lined with fur. She was a girl, and a very pretty one at that. That was what made his mouth drop, not those things. However, it was her moon. Like eyes that really caught his attention. This was a type of Dojutsu he had never seen before. That girl stopped when she felt eyes on her. She learned that she had a second sense because her family watched her so much. With that one turn, she got a bright red flush on her face. Naruto, who was her hero, was staring at her and his mouth was open a little. Because she didn't know what to do, she did what her gut told her to do. She squeaked and then ran ahead of her team. Whoa. Kiba yelled as Hinata walked quickly past him. What's the matter, Hinata? The girl in question didn't answer and kept walking. When Kurenai turned around to see what scared her student, she saw Naruto trying to look past all the people around him. This made her eyebrows shoot up past her hairline. Did he want to know more about her student? Before she could answer her question, A girl with platinum hair who she knew to be a Yamanaka walked right by her, looking very angry. Naruto also saw her and turned pale with fear. Something that happened had something to do with him, and it must have made Enma so angry that he let out his worst demon. He would have died before he stayed for this. As Naruto ran away like a fox seeing a mad bloodhound, he yelled, "I'm innocent." As Ino began to chase her prey, she yelled, "Get back here. We're going to have a rematch." He yelled back, "No way. It's my day off. I'm not wasting it." He wasn't looking where he was going. Kurenai looked at what was said and tried to figure out what it meant, but she just shrugged her shoulder. She thought it was cute that Naruto might be interested in her student. She might be able to make it happen so that they can meet up. It was his plan to lose his tracker when he turned the corner, but instead he ran into someone holding his neck. Naruto felt bad about looking at the face of the person who had captured him. His eyes met Anko's, his surrogate big sister and housemate, and she had a wicked grin on her face that made him feel bad. When Ino turned the corner, she stopped right away when she saw that someone had already caught her target. She gasped when she saw the coworker of her father. Naruto yelled, "Someone, save me. Anyone," as he tried to get free from her grip. When he looked at Ino with hope, it was crushed under his feet when she shook her head and stared at him like she was attending a funeral. A male voice jokingly told the owner, "You don't have to be so dramatic," as he stepped up to the crazy kunoichi and smiled at Aruka. "I think you should let him go. You're scaring him and it's already bad enough he's living with you." Anko gave it some thought for a moment and then let go. "Yeah, you're right." They both looked at the other blonde present and gave her a look that was a mix of being scared and being caught in the headlights. Aruka asked carefully, "What brings you here, Ino?" She squeaked, "Nothing," and then ran off like the devil was after her. She couldn't stop thinking about what she heard as she ran away. "He's living with that crazy woman?" She yelled to herself. She would have to wait another day to finish that match. As Naruto turned to face them, he said something about a crazy ass bitch. "You wouldn't be talking about me, would you?" Anko asked with a touching look. "I wasn't talking about you, and besides, that would be giving you too much credit," Naruto told her as he crossed his arms. He was proud that he made that joke without getting hit in the face like he usually does. Anko blinked a little in surprise when she realized those words were meant for Ino. The blonde asked with his hands on the back of his head, "So, what are you guys doing here?" Anko put her hands on her hips and asked, "What does it look like we're doing?" "Aruka and I are going to take you shopping." "Huh?" Naruto asked in a smart way. As Aruka felt the weight of having to explain it in a little more detail, he shook his head. "Something came up, and because of it you need new clothes." Naruto laughed out loud after staring at his old teacher as if he had two heads. Aruka made a face but didn't say anything. Anko only had a mean smile on her face because she liked to ruin her little brother's fun. The blonde saw that they were still being serious when she looked at them again. "Oh. Your guys are being serious?" Yeah," Anko said with a toothy grin as she leaned forward. "Take a step back and ask, could we please talk about this?" Naruto smiled nervously. That orange jumpsuit had to come off, but they would have to chase him and do it. Anko stood up straight again to take in how much work they had to do and said, "You don't have a say in the matter. Safety orange to ninjas is not very safe. So we're going to remedy that." He looked at Aruka with a beseeching, shocked look, hoping that his old teacher would save him. But when he looked closer, he saw that the man was behind everything the witch had said. "Not at all." Naruto yelled to himself. Took Sakura to the bridge, where she sat on the railing and sighed with happiness. Yesterday, she worked on a new Kinzokuden move for the rest of the day. She didn't have enough chakra to finish the attack, so it wasn't complete. She had just the right amount of chakra to pull out at least one poled weapon. The spear was her first choice. Her eyes went to a nearby tree and caught sight of the last Uchiha lying down on a branch. It was the package he was holding under one arm that interested her. She waved her hand and said, "Hey Sasuke. Kun. Is that what you needed to pick up yesterday?" He gave a head nod and then jumped off his perch. Before she could ask him what he was doing, he walked up to her and held out the item. He looked away slightly embarrassed, but not so embarrassed that his cheeks turned any color. She asked, "What is this for?" Because she didn't know what the reason was. He just said, "I had it made for you when I heard you were learning Kinjutsu." She took the package because she was too interested to wait. Sasuke looked back at her to see how she would react. Giving gifts was still something new for him. As soon as Sakura opened the long box, she was shocked by what was inside. It was a katana, and it looked like it cost a lot. The handle was bound in a pale pink color, and the hilt was a simple gold color. There was a golden tassel on the end of the katana, and it was pretty all around. She didn't know what to do inside. She wasn't very good with swords, but she didn't want Sasuke to stress out over getting her the wrong thing. Shokaku smiled as she looked at her idol. It looked like swords would be her new favorite thing. When she softly told him, "Thank you," he gave her a small scowl and his cheeks turned a very light pink color. He told her, "Thank you," and then jumped back into his tree. And those were some of the strangest words he had ever said. But Sakura just smiled and didn't say anything. She could tell Sasuke wasn't used to this, but it didn't bother her because he was nice enough to get her something. After a few minutes, they both felt like someone else was with them. When they looked at the newcomer, they saw someone they almost didn't recognize because of his light hair and whisker marks. They saw that Naruto was angry, but they thought it was because he wasn't wearing his usual ugly orange jumpsuit. Instead of his old clothes, he wore a black jacket that he left open, showing a chainmail shirt and a red vest with lots of pockets for different things. He wore black cargo pants with his kunai pouch where his orange pants would have been. He wore new red sandals and red metal plated gloves with a konoha leaf on them to finish off his look. The goggles over his eyes were the only thing left of his old outfit. Sasuke asked, "What the hell happened to you?" He was interested in what had changed Naruto's style. He said, "Anko and Aruka. Sensei," and then he pouted. Somewhat awkwardly, they were able to get their fake little brother to take off the jumpsuit after a long fight. Anko tackled and held him down while Aruka took off his clothes and burned them in front of Naruto's eyes with a low level fire jutsu. Later, when they weren't around, he put up a gravestone for his favorite clothes. That's when Naruto noticed his teammate's new katana. He smiled and said, "Cool katana, Sakura Chan. Where'd you get it?" As Sakura held her new sword closer, she got a little red. Sasuke-kun got it for me. Naruto's quick change from a sly smile to one of shock didn't surprise her. He had no idea what to say and looked blankly at Sasuke, seeing that his teammate wasn't even paying attention. The blonde prankster had no words until their sensei showed up. Sasuke never bought anyone a gift. What had caused this? The jerk would never be able to win over his crush if he was becoming romantically interested in her. His day was now awful. He had to wear the new clothes that Aruka and Anko had bought for him, and now he was falling behind in the love race with Sakura. What could go wrong besides that? 2 puffs of smoke filled the area before he could answer his own question. This meant that their senseis, Yamato and Kakashi, were on their way. With a lazy wave of his hand, Kakashi said, "Yo." He walked up to the group and said, "We have some good news." While he was still trying to explain what it was, he noticed Naruto's new clothes and Sakura's katana. First, he tried to guess what had happened to the Kyokugen user. "Let me guess. It was Anko and Aruka." Naruto smiled inside. "They burned my jumpsuit in front of me." After that, Yamato looked at Sakura. "A sword? I thought you liked spears and other weapons." She winced when she heard Sasuke fall from his tree and land in the water. When Naruto heard the splash and turned to see what was going on, he laughed and fell off the railing onto the bridge. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, but he knew where Sakura got the sword. "Sasuke has been showing me how to use them," Sakura said with a blush. "Oh," Yamato replied. He did not tell them until Sasuke walked back onto the bridge, this time drenched and in a bad mood. "Anyways, Kakashi. Senpai and I have signed you all up for the chunin exams." He stopped laughing and looked at his teachers as if someone had told him he could eat ramen for free for the rest of his life. After Sasuke heard it, his bad mood went away right away. But Sakura started to look nervous. Now, Kakashi began to talk. "You guys don't have to do it at all. Show up if you want to do it. Keep in mind that you don't have to, but I really think you should because it will help you learn." The blonde smiled as if he really thought he had hit gold. It meant that people from other countries would be coming, which gave him a lot of BL limits to copy. As he thought about what he was going to see, his imagination took over and made him smile even bigger. You all have the rest of the day off, Yamato said, picking up where his old captain left off. This is so you have time to think about it and decide if you want to take part. It also gives you time to get ready. Go to the academy if you decide to do it. And Sasaki made sure not to accidentally pocket his sheet because he knew the water in his clothes would ruin it. It made him angry again to think that he gave Sakura the wrong kind of weapon as he walked away. What a bad way to mess things up. Sakura also left, frowning as she thought about what to do. She knew she was the weakest person in the group and tried her best not to bring her teammates down. A voice from Kakashi stopped Naruto just as he was about to jump away to tell Aruka what had happened. This is already known to Naruto, Anko, and Aruka. That's likely why they bought you new clothes. He yelled as he turned around. How did they know? It was Anko who was at the meeting, Tenzo said. Oh. Now, Kakashi cleared his throat. I haven't been able to teach you how to properly use Byaku chakra for a number of reasons. At the very least, I'd like to teach you how to fill the air with it. My stronger taijutsu form is based on it, and the cloud itself can be useful in many ways. Like what? Naruto asked, and he didn't try to hide how excited he was. Oh, like the extra sense of touch I told you about back at the Land of Waves, the ability to mess up some Dojutsu like the Sharingan, Naruto said. Hearing that, Sasaki was already jumping up and down with excitement at the thought of pummeling him into the ground. And to be able to make your jutsu stronger. He bowed to his teacher and put out his hands to show that he had had enough. Teach me. Kakashi's eyes smiled, and Yamato shook his head. Teaching Naruto was always a wild ride. Naruto was already very happy when it got dark. He was on his way to Anko's apartment to get ready for the next day. He would be able to move one step closer to becoming the Hokage. It was harder than it looked to control the chakra cloud. Because Byaku chakra was like an extension of the senses when it was outside of the body, he had to learn how to stop it from dissipating or else it would be a waste. Even though it was hard, Naruto didn't feel like he was under much of a strain because his reserves were so high. He stopped just as he landed on a roof because he could feel his Kyokugen's senses going off. He stood still and looked around, his eyes moving as he looked for the person. Anywhere he looked, he could tell it was an elemental limit mixed with bloodlust. What the hell did that person come here for? Come out, Gara, Naruto told it as he turned to see where it was coming from. It's not hard for me to sense you. A cascade of sand tried to swallow him up from behind a cooling duct. As soon as Naruto saw it, his eyes grew wide for a moment. But just in time, he realized what was going on and jumped out of the way. Some of the sand stuck to him like parasites, making him growl. This made him wipe it off. Gara came out from hiding, and Naruto could see him through his emotionless eyes. The blonde was horrified as she watched as the sand went back into the gourd that the boy was carrying on his back and was then sealed with a big cork. After that, all the metal came to life and slowly crept toward Gara as if he were a super magnet. Naruto broke both of his eyes and quickly changed into Hyakuri, letting his electricity run wild. Because his face turned into a bloodthirsty grin, it was clear that the redhead wanted it. Naruto told him with a smirk, calm down. Mind telling me what brought this about? Are you going to take the exam? Gara had a question. Yeah. Good. When Naruto felt the force pulling his weapons to Gara suddenly stop, he knew it was time to turn off the Jikaiden. It looks like I don't have to kill you right now. This boy with whiskers said, that's going to help me sleep better tonight. And what if I had not chosen to take the exam? Right now, I would have killed you. I don't know why, but mother wants your blood more than anyone else. Huh? Naruto tried to ask, but the boy across from him spoke in a way that made him look confused. Who's this, mother? The demon inside my head, Shukaku, the incarnate of sand, Gara replied in a cold voice. Gara slowly turned around and walked across the roof. Naruto tried to call out to him and ask him to explain more, but the words wouldn't come out. In the back of his mind, he heard a growl. There was no doubt that Kyuubi didn't like this guy, but he couldn't explain why. Gara, this one. What Naruto thought about him made him feel uneasy. There was something about him that made her feel like she knew him, but only because the redhead felt so much bloodlust around him. Even though every part of him told Naruto to stay away, he knew that they would meet again someday. Naruto slowly turned around to continue his way home after seeing the Suna genin leave. He wasn't sure why, but he felt like tonight would be one of those nights. He wasn't crazy when he thought it was one of those nights, and found himself in a hallway with water that was silver and broken mirrors. Naruto never liked what it was like to walk through his mind. In a way, it felt like going through a carnival mirror house, but there was a demon at the end of the path. He let out a sigh as he waded through the knee-deep water to get to the antechamber by following the red light. Even though it seemed like such a short walk this time, he had been here a few times before, and most of those times had some kind of nightmare. "If you had taken me up on my offer," a voice said in the huge room, "I wouldn't give you them." When the redhead came out of the shadows, he scowled. She had a smile that seemed both mischievous and mean. "That is, the nightmares," she said as she pressed her hands against the wall. "How about you walk a little closer?" "How about hell no?" Naruto said this as he stopped a long way away. "What do you want, bitch?" "How rude." She looked away and crossed her arms like a child who was upset about something a parent said. "I was going to let you in on a little info, but after that, I might just go away." The blonde thought to himself, wouldn't that be nice? "You're about as mature as that Gara guy." There was a sharp look in the corner of her eye that seemed to go on forever as she looked at him. Naruto could see that her eyes were filled with pure hatred that was falling like a waterfall. She slowly turned her head to look at him and raised her hands to the barrier. She then walked up to it and pressed her forehead against it. Then Naruto could feel that the whole room filled with a killer intent that was so strong that it changed the air. He started to sweat coldly on the back of his neck, and all of his muscles stopped moving. He looked at his prisoner with wide eyes as she slowly changed shape, just like she did when she was mad or up to no good. Kyuubi's glowing, cat-like eyes got dangerously narrow as her hair got messy and her nails got longer until they looked like claws. At first, it was just an aura that looked like a fox. But then, from behind her, a single chakra tail started to sway angrily. "Do not think so low of me." It seemed like her voice was going backwards and she was underwater. "Do not ever compare me to that trash or to anyone else that is less important. I won't be as nice if you do that." Kyuubi hit the wall with anger, sending Naruto to the bottom of the pool and into the cold water. After that, the aura started to fade, leaving the killer intent in the air. She couldn't lose control because if she did, she might lose her sex appeal, which would make it even harder to get her out of her cage. Naruto didn't run away when she used fear tactics. He just stood up and looked her in the eyes. She couldn't make him fear her, and nothing she did would change that. She knew it too, which made her eyes even smaller. She just said, "Stop being the hero." She turned around and started to walk back into the dark without saying a word. "Didn't you have something to tell me?" With his serious face still on, Naruto asked. He never let his guard down when he was with Kyuubi. It was either serious or silly. She looked at him over her shoulder and grunted in a lazy way. "Be careful with that Suna kid. He is where Ichibi no Shukaku is kept. He'll feed you to his sand as soon as he gets the chance." "Ichibi no Shukaku?" Naruto said this over and over to himself as he thought about the water below. "You mean a tailed beast like you?" He turned around to find her gone. Even her normally bright red eyes couldn't be seen. He laughed to himself because he knew he had really upset her this time. Putting her up against Gara was like putting her up against Shukaku, a demon who was weaker and crazier than her. It was clear that calling her weak made her angry. The world around him shook and twisted, which meant that his adventure was over. The blonde was glad that his visit with Kyuubi went faster than any other visit he had had. Maybe she wanted to get rid of him because he made her so mad. If that was the case, he would use that against her every chance he got. He checked his alarm and saw that it was still early in the morning. More than enough time to get together with his team. When he had to wait for his teammates, Sasaki leaned against the front wall of the academy. He didn't want to be late for the first part of the chunin exams today. He was still mad at himself for not getting Sakura something that would have worked better with the way she fought. Every night, he hit his head against a wall in the hopes that the pain would help him forget the embarrassing memory. When he looked up the path, he saw Naruto walking toward him with a cocky smile that told everyone that he was going to kick everyone in the behind. Most of the time, Sasaki thought of the blonde as a spoiled brat who was full of herself. For him, the dobi would always be last. "Morning, dickhead," Naruto said with a hand wave. "Birdshit," Sasaki bluntly replied. The blonde smiled as he walked up to him and said, "Ah, Sasaki got jokes today." He was still wearing the same clothes from the day before, including the goggles that still make Sasaki mad. His limit told him that the only Kinzokuden user still alive was walking toward them with her katana on her back. Naruto turned back to the path he had come from before. She took a deep breath and said, "I've decided that I'm going to do this too. I just hope I don't hold you guys back." Naruto yelled, "Great." As the group walked quickly up to the door, Naruto jumped ahead to be the first to open it. Already, as he grabbed the doorknob, he could feel the rush of adrenaline going through him. His Kyokugen could sense all the bloodline limits that were almost begging to be copied. Sakura yelled, "Well, hurry up and open the door." The small group was shocked by how many people were waiting to take the test when the door opened. He did what they asked. He still didn't know about people from AIM, Kusa, and a lot of other places. Naruto was a little disappointed that there were no Kiri ninjas there. He thought that someone might know something about where Haku used to come from. He also didn't expect the problem that the large number of people there would cause. His eyes had to be seen by someone at least once before he could copy them. He didn't mean for this to happen. He knew he couldn't get away with copying, so the prankster sighed. After a few seconds, Naruto started to walk around aimlessly in the area, trying to figure out where Gara might be. As he did this, he picked up on the familiar signs of people with the same bloodline limit as the pretty girl he saw. The main difference, though, was that all of them were pretty cocky, especially the one toward. Before he could get close to the guy, Sakura grabbed his arm and pulled him away, like a mother trying to keep an eye on a naughty kid. She led him to a door that was guarded by two chunin and said, "You stupid. Come on, I found where we're supposed to go." At that moment, Naruto finally got a sense of where Gara was. She was one floor above them, in a room other than the one Sakura was leading them to. Sakura and Sasuke were caught off guard when Naruto suddenly pulled his arm free. "That's not the right door," he said. Sasuke asked, "What makes you think that?" Naruto tried to come up with an excuse while his sixth sense started to look around the floor where Gara was. That's where most of the bloodline limit users were. It was hard for him not to smile softly when he felt the girl's signature from the other day. She rushed him and asked, "Well?" He got ready to throw something away, but when he saw the familiar Chinese buns, he stopped. Naruto could see from a distance that she was having a hard time getting through the door because she was sure it was the real one. A friendly smile and a wave of his hand said, "Hey, Tenten." That girl also smiled when she saw him when she turned around. "Oh. Hey, Naruto." As he walked up to her, he said, "I'm sorry, but this is the wrong room." Tenten said, "Oh, I see. We were just pretending. We wanted to look weaker, you know, to hide how strong we really are." Smart idea. The two guards looked at each other and then back at the kids who were coming up to them. They didn't need that. Now everyone and their dog, no pun intended for the Inazaka family, was going to go to the second floor. As the blonde left, a strange man asked Tenten, "Do you know this person, flower of my team?" When Naruto looked at him, he wanted to use his Mokuton to grow a tree and then use a stick from it to cut out his eyes right away. Who in their right mind would dress in such bad clothes? Along with a bowl cut and a green jumpsuit, this guy looked like this. He was still not ready for what he saw when he saw the eyebrows. They were so big and hairy that it looked like two azalea bushes were growing out of his eyes. "Of course I do," Tenten told the ugly genin. "This is Uzumaki Naruto. He comes to my family's shop." "Naruto, this is my teammate, Rock Lee." The young man in green was already on Naruto before he could say hello properly. He shook his hand so quickly that the blonde swore he was going to get whiplash. Lee said with excitement, "It's great to meet such a young friend of my teammate." Sasuke told Naruto, "You were right," as he walked up with his Sharingan fully charged. He didn't like the words, but he had to say them to his annoying teammate this time. The door's number is covered with a simple genjutsu. The two guards looked at each other and quickly became angry as they moved toward the group. "This is so annoying," one of them said. "We were trying to separate the good from the weak, but you guys kind of ruined it. Looks like we're going to have to staple those mouths of yours shut." It was Naruto who was the first person one of the guys rushed forward to attack. The boy with the tan set up his own kick when he saw the attack coming. Lee stopped both attacks just as they were about to meet. Sakura yelled, "Holy crap. I didn't even see him move." While Naruto's foot hit the ground, Lee let go of his new friend's leg. His eyes got very narrow. He took out a senbon and threw the needle very fast behind himself, hitting a guy who jumped backwards. No one could stop him. The new person came in with long, flowing black hair, but Naruto was most interested in his eyes. They had the same Dojutsu as the shy girl. They were very different from each other. His were mean and unfriendly, and they had a "I'm better than you" attitude. He pulled out 3 more senbon and put them between his fingers. "So you're that tense, cocky jerk I keep smelling," Naruto told him. "You know it's not nice to sneak around, right? You're pretty cocky, aren't you?" The other person asked as he took out the needle. He quickly changed stances that Naruto didn't recognize, but the blonde didn't get left behind. He took a basic Wraith Fist-style stance instead. "Whoa, hold the show!" Tenten yelled as she walked between them. She smiled a little sheepishly at Naruto as she turned to him first. She changed her name to Neji and said, "Sorry, Naruto, but this is my other teammate, Hyuga Neji." "Neji, this is Uzumaki Naruto. He comes to our shop a lot." Naruto was the first to calm down. He put his senbon back in its case after taking it out. "Since you're Tenten's teammate, I'll leave you alone for the moment." Neji laughed and looked at Tenten and Lee. "I told you guys that we aren't supposed to attract attention. We might as well head up to the next floor now since everybody is going to be aware of this now." Team 7 watched Team 9 leave. At least Tenten waved goodbye to Naruto and Lee said goodbye in a very happy way. Naruto said to himself, "What a jerk. He makes you look all warm and cozy." The blonde stuck out his thumb at Sasuke, which got a growl but nothing else. It wasn't a good time to kill Naruto for show. The younger team showed them the way, and they went up the stairs to the second floor. They saw Rock Lee again, this time in a green jumpsuit. He had a determined, fiery look in his eyes. "I challenge you, Uchiha Sasuke," Lee said as he stood up, "so that we may find out who is the true genius. Me, a genius of hard work, are you, a natural genius, like Neji. And I would like to prove my love for Sakura." Chan at the same time. He turned red as he blew a kiss at Sakura. She screamed in shock and jumped behind her crush to get away. Her crush was on her back, and she yelled at Lee, "Nasty." He said, "Okay, all." Sasuke tried to agree. Naruto stepped forward with a smile and cut him off. "I want to fight you as well." Lee smiled and calmed down. "I'm sorry, Naruto Kun, but I must fight another genius in order to prove that we who struggle can be just as great." The younger genin spoke with his head tilted to the side as Naruto tried to understand what he meant. "What is a genius of hard work, and what do you mean by we who struggle?" As he spoke, Green Beast Jr. smiled, happy to be able to explain. "There are 2 types of geniuses, the natural-born kind, and those that work hard for what they have. I'm a genius of hard work because I train so hard with the hopes that I'll be able to fight as good as a natural genius." Naruto smiled and said, "Well, how about a battle between geniuses of hard work? We're a lot alike. I had to work hard for everything I know." He then struck Sasuke in the eyes with his Byaku chakra, mostly because he didn't want Sasuke to copy his moves. It would be rude to turn down such a fight. It worked for Naruto because Lee's smile got 10 miles wide. "Yes," he said as he took a stand, "it would be rude." Sasuke didn't like that Naruto got to fight first, but he could only use his Sharingan to copy what they showed him. After noticing a chakra spike coming from the Uchiha, Naruto sent out a cloud of Byaku chakra that was so bright that it couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Seeing Sasuke look shocked at the sight of it made him feel good. He thought to himself, "What the hell?" She asked, "What's wrong?" He leaned forward and looked doubtful as he said, "There's a chakra cloud around Naruto. It's making it hard to read him." "Wait, is that chakra white?" That's what Sakura asked. After this, they turned to look at the 2 fighters as their fight began. Lee was the first to charge forward, going so fast that no one could keep up. Sakura and Sasuke were shocked when Naruto blocked the attack, which made Lee smile even bigger. The elder genin vanished again, but Naruto's arm suddenly blocked him again. Naruto grabbed Lee by the wrist and punched him in the cheek, knocking him backwards. Rock Lee slowly stood up and rubbed the spot where Naruto had hit him hard. He still smiled even after such a hit. "It looks like I failed to see how good you are, Naruto Kun," Lee said stepping back. I shouldn't hold back so much anymore, it would be just as rude as turning down a battle with you. The moment Naruto was about to ask him what he meant, Lee, who was standing where the Uzumaki used to be and arcing one leg up into the air, threw him across the hallway. Not long after he landed, Naruto quickly did a handstand. But just as he was about to fix himself, he took another kick to the stomach, which sent him flying into the wall and cracked it from behind. Lee watched as Naruto stood up and changed his stance for battle. He jumped on the balls of his feet. He told himself, if I want to keep up, I'll have to add chakra to my muscles. He was lucky that he had a huge amount of spiritual energy available to him. He built up his Byaku chakra and charged at Lee faster than before. It was his turn to attack. As Naruto kicked Lee many times, the blows were stronger and faster than ever. Naruto used a weak spot in Lee's defense to do a roundhouse kick that knocked him backwards. He wasn't done yet, though, as he sent another kick to Lee's side. Lee was very upset when he stepped on something. Naruto asked in jest, "This is going to hurt, isn't it?" He wasn't really looking forward to the pain that was about to happen. "I'm afraid so, Naruto." "Kun," Lee replied. The master of taijutsu swung Naruto around, hit him hard against a wall, and then threw him up in the air. Before the blonde could hit the ground, Lee kicked him further into the air, which hurt. Sasuke kept an eye on everything. Naruto's white chakra made it hard to read him, but he was still able to remember everything Lee did. The kid may have been weird, but he knew a lot about taijutsu. The other person did Shadow of the Dancing Leaf and got behind Naruto before Naruto could get back on his feet. Lee said, "Naruto. Kun, you're a lot stronger than I thought. For that I will show you one of my strongest moves." When Naruto felt Lee's chains come off and start to wrap around him, he knew bad things were about to happen just for him. Another green blur came into the area and hit Lee into a wall, saving the blonde from disaster. Naruto quickly figured out what was going on. "Man, I would have felt that in the morning," Naruto thought to himself as he touched down. When he looked at the stranger, he immediately wished he hadn't. A bigger, older, and uglier Lee was even worse than the first Lee. It was like a nightmare come true. "Lee, my young student." The bigger one yelled at the smaller one. "If you had used that move on Naruto, Kun, he would have been hurt." "Who the heck is this guy, fuzzy brows?" Naruto asked as his Kyokugen went back to normal. As Lee introduced his teacher, Maeda Guy, the green beast of Konoha, he said, "Forgive me. This is my beautiful sensei." "Okay," Naruto said in a low voice. "This is turning out to be one weird day." He started to look around the area for safe ways to get away. He had to leave this crazy show. Just by looking at them, he could feel his brain cells killing themselves one by one. Another thing Naruto saw was that Sakura and Sasuke were already gone. He said to himself, "Damn it. They left without me." He was about to run away when Maeda Guy punched Lee into the wall. "Lee, my beautiful student, you should not have used that move. You could have harmed Naruto." "Kun." Lee yelled, "Forgive me." As tears poured out of his eyes. "I owed it to him." It was a battle among geniuses of hard work. Guy was shocked and asked himself, "Naruto. Kun? A genius of hard work? Is it true that my rival has a student who wishes to work for glory?" "Yes, sensei." Guy looked for Naruto but couldn't find him when he said, "This is something to celebrate." "Naruto. Kun. I wonder where he has gone to." As Naruto ran down the halls to get away from the crazy people of Konoha, he huffed. Sakura and Sasuke were standing in front of the door to the next room with Kakashi, his sensei, standing over them. This made him stop. As Naruto walked up to them, Kakashi asked, "When are you going to get here?" The blonde told him with a thumb over his shoulder, "Sorry, got hung over on a couple of Fruit Loops that got out of the nut house. But I wonder about something, throughout the entire battle, Lee didn't use a single jutsu, nothing but hand. 2. Hand combat. They thought their teammate was crazy when they looked at him. That looks like great taijutsu. Who needs ninjutsu or genjutsu at that point? But, Sasuke thought, those two didn't see what I did. What he said would happen did happen. His Sharingan took on Lee's calluses, bruises, and cuts. He saw it for a split second, but that was enough for him to figure out that boy wasn't quite right. Kakashi told Naruto, that was a very sharp observation. The reason he didn't use ninjutsu was because he simply can't. That doesn't make sense, Sakura said. isn't everyone able to use chakra? Her teacher told her, well, that's not really the case with everyone. Lee suffers from a rare disease that only allows him to produce enough chakra to live. Because of that, he was made the dead last of his class, but on a brighter note, ever since he graduated he's been working hard, mastering taijutsu to levels many shinobi dare not match. You could say him and Naruto are a lot alike. When Sasuke and Sakura heard that, they looked at their teammate with some surprise. Lee could understand what it was like to be looked down upon because you were the worst. Both of them had to work hard for everything. As he looked at the three, Kakashi quickly switched back to being a teacher. He cleared his throat to get their attention. Alright, now that you're all here, you can take the exam. All three of you had to come or you wouldn't be able to enter. When Sakura heard that, she was glad she came. She would have been very disappointing to both of them if she hadn't. Kakashi began, some advice for you three. Don't show off. The last thing you need is to have a target slapped onto your back for doing something stupid. Sakura and Naruto both knew what that meant, no bloodline unless it was really needed. Naruto, in particular, liked to show off a lot. Finally, Kakashi said as he ended his speech, work together. From now on, you three will need to depend on each other a lot. Good luck, and I'm proud of you. They all agreed as he opened the door. The three people slowly went through the door to the first part of the test. When Naruto walked into the room, he could feel his Kyokugen going crazy. But he knew why, most of the people in the building were here. He had no idea there were that many. They were all shocked by how many people were crammed into the room. There must have been 4 times as many as what they saw before. From a corner of the room, Naruto could feel a familiar signature that was marked with a strong desire to kill. When he turned around, Gara's foam green eyes were staring at him with all the hate they always have. Temari and Kankuro saw that their brother was crazy about Naruto, but they didn't tell anyone. They didn't need to take the brunt of his anger. That was better left to his new toy to chew on. Naruto had written that day in his mind on the ramen stand, and that's when his Kyokugen found it. He looked around and saw Team 8. The last member, the quiet girl, sat quietly at a desk while Kiba and Shino talked it up. The bug was ignoring him to talk to one of his own bugs. When Naruto saw her, he felt like he knew her. He stared at her for a minute. Where had that hair been before? He also thought of someone he met when he saw her coat, but he couldn't put his finger on the right person. It was then that he saw her. It was Hinata from class. How come he hadn't seen her right away? He walked over to the small group because he wanted to learn more about her and maybe figure out if he could trust her with his secret. He also really wanted to copy her Dojutsu. When Kiba saw his old favorite chew toy from the academy, he stopped talking and smiled like he was wild. Wow, I didn't know they let losers in here too, Kiba told him. Naruto hopped up next to Hinata. Chan and said, hey, Hinata. Chan. He didn't pay attention to Kiba, who was grinding his teeth, or Shino, who raised an eyebrow at the interruption. The Hyuga heir looked at the person who called her name, and her face lit up like a morning star with a blush. She would normally run away quickly, but she couldn't get out of this one because of things she couldn't change. She really hoped she wouldn't pass out. She stuttered, oh, hi-en. Naruto. Kun, and waved her hand shyly. Though she tried not to, Hinata couldn't help but smile a little. She loved his sly smile. It always made her melt. Being nearby, he said, hey, I just thought I'd stop by and say hello. He stood next to her desk. By the way, I never noticed your eyes before. They're really cool. He believed her eyes were cool. People in her clan looked down on her because of her eyes, but Naruto thought they were beautiful. She had never thought of this before. Thank you, she said quietly, and he smiled at her again. Naruto was looking at Kiba, so Kiba yelled, hey, don't ignore me when I'm talking to you. Did you hear me, dead? Last? The jokester held his nose to make it more funny and said, close your mouth. I can smell your dog. Ass breath all the way here. Hearing Hinata laugh, even if it was at Kiba's expense, made him smile. As he rolled up his sleeves, Kiba tried to tell him, oh, I'm going to beat your. Stop fighting, Sakura told the small group as she and Sasuke walked up to them. Sorry, Naruto's been a pain in the ass lately. We've had trouble trying to keep him on his leash. When she looked at her teammate, he had one finger below his eyelid and his tongue sticking out at Kiba. He was also giving the wild boy the bird with his free hand. The dog owner snarled at him and said, "You dirty son of a." Akamaru barked in agreement. As a banshee scream echoed through the area, Naruto's laughter and Kiba's threat were cut off. Naruto. The blonde turned bright red with fear and quickly hid under a desk next to Hinata, which made the girl blush even more. Ino then stomped towards the group, making them all jump. When Shikamaru caught up to them, he said, "You guys are here too. How annoying." While Sakura watched her ex-best friend look everywhere for Team 7's missing member, Ino got very angry at Naruto. She asked, "Why is Ino so mad at Naruto?" "She's been that way for a while," Shoji said with his mouth full. "Ever since the battle the two had, she's been calling him her rival and tries to call a rematch every time they meet." Sakura complained, "Wait, I thought Ino was my rival." She yelled, "Hey, Ino. Pig," to try to get the blonde girl's attention. It worked, because Ino turned around and gave her a very angry look. "I thought I was your rival. Forget about you." Ino yelled back. "You couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag." Sakura's mouth fell open. Did Ino just say she was weak? She would rather fight Naruto than her. How did that get done? That Yamanaka didn't even pay attention to him at school, so why did he change his mind? Kibi told her to calm down. Naruto's not that strong. Remember, he's the dead last. The worst grades in class and the weakest of the whole group, you know? Akamaru said in agreement. He was ready to jump out from under the desk and hit Kiba hard. Taking her eyes off of her fox hunting, Ino turned around and gave Kiba a mean look. It made him shrink a little. "If Naruto is the weakest of us all, I'll eat my shoes." Kiba asked with a knowing smile, "Then how do you want them? Boiled or grilled?" She crossed her arms and asked, "How about you eat yours if you fight him and lose?" She then went back to looking for her next opponent. Sasuke looked at Ino with a raised eyebrow. He couldn't help but agree with what she said. Many people thought Naruto wasn't as strong as he really was. Naruto was not that weak. He had been on the losing end of a fight with the blonde. It also caught Sasuke off guard that the blonde pig hadn't already grabbed him. In fact, she still hadn't admitted that he existed. His other half was glad to get rid of a fangirl, even though part of him didn't understand what had changed. When the Uchiha looked at Sakura, she looked sad, which scared them. This wouldn't make her feel better about herself in the long run. "Hinata, do you know where Naruto is?" Ino asked loudly, making Hinata weak. "Never mind." She looked some more and smiled when she finally found his blonde hair stuck up under the desk next to the girl who was blushing. She yelled, "There you are," as she pulled him by the hair, making him writhe in pain. "You and I. A rematch, but this time, winner take all." He yelled at her, "Could you let me go? Maybe I'll think about it." He let out a sigh of relief as she let go and looked at him with hope. Shikamaru asked from his new seat, "You should have never made her mad, right?" Naruto asked himself, "What the hell did I do?" He didn't understand why everyone wanted to kill him. He had a rivalry with Sasuke more than anyone else. First it was Ino, then it was the bloodthirsty Gara. He didn't care if Kiba wanted to fight him. So why did everyone want his head? "I don't think it's a good time for a battle," Shino told Ino. Naruto thanked the gods he didn't have to make an excuse, because he was doing that a lot these days. She replied, "What's your point?" and crossed her arms. "Abarum. San does have a good point," agreed a new voice that was too polite. "You rookies are attracting way too much attention than what is considered safe." The newcomer with silver hair and glasses pointed at a group of ninjas who were looking at them with anger and dislike. There was a sound note on each of their headbands, and compared to the other competitors, they all looked very angry. They're from Otogakure, the village hidden in sound. It's a fairly new village. I believe it was just formed just little over a year ago. "And you are?" Kiba asked. The person pushed his glasses up even higher on the bridge of his nose and said, "Oh yes, how rude of me. My name is Yakushi Kabuto. It's a pleasure to meet the Rookie 9, the only rookie ninjas entered. This is my 8th time taking this exam, and I highly suggest you all watch your backs. It is quite difficult." When Naruto told him straight out, "Ha. Man, you must be sucked to have failed it that many times. Sakura punched him in the side of the face. Ah, I may not have passed this exam, but my trials have brought much fruit. He took out a stack of blank cards. When he took off the top card, he sent some chakra into it, which turned it into a small map. All of the newbies leaned forward to look at the small map, which made them all raise an eyebrow. He put the map card at the bottom of the deck and said, "You all are very lucky. Not many people get to look at a world map of all the current shinobi nations. These cards reveal the public information of a person, including stats, number of missions completed, team members, and etc." Sasaki asked, "Really?" He seemed interested. "I want some information." "Okay. On who?" "Rock Lee. By knowing his name, it makes it easy on me." Naruto looked at his teammate with a mean face as Kabuto pulled out the card. He wasn't interested in that way of spying on an enemy, even if the information was out there for everyone to see. He wasn't into that, but hey, a little knowledge never hurt anyone. He turned the card over and raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. It says he was the very last student in his class and is teamed with Hyuga Neji, the Rookie of the Year, and Tenten. It also says that his genjutsu and ninjutsu don't exist, but his taijutsu is. Wow, that's off the charts." He put the card away and turned his attention back to the others. "Is there anyone else you all want to look at?" "Yeah," Ino spoke, which was a surprise. "Got anything on Uzumaki Naruto?" she asked, pointing her thumb at the boy with the whiskers. He growled at her. He said, "Give me a second." Just like before, Kabuto picked up a card from his deck and put a little chakra into it. "Well, it says here that you were also the very last," the ninja with 4 eyes told Naruto with a frown. "It says your genjutsu is below average, taijutsu is average, but you ninjutsu is above average. No bloodline limits of any kind, but how amazing. It says that you and Team 7 completed an A ranked mission. How splendid." 7 was looked at with a bit of respect by Teams 8 and 10, but Sasaki wasn't happy. The information was way off. He knew how strong Naruto could be and was sure the blonde was much stronger. "Bullshit," Sasaki said, which made Naruto and everyone else pay attention. "That information is too old. Naruto and I once had a mock battle, and if recall correctly, Dobi was fighting on par with me." Kibi yelled, "You're joking. There's no way that the village idiot could get that good that fast." The word Kiba used to describe Naruto made him narrow his eyes. "Can it, bastard? I could take you on any day of the week. Hell, you stink so bad I could do it blindfolded." The kids from Hidden Sound finally had enough of their silly talking. Dosu walked up to the newcomers and made them tense up so they were ready for a fight. Kabuto, for some reason, stayed calm and adjusted his glasses as they came. He told the group in a scary voice, "You all are starting to annoy the hell out of me. Let it be known that we, from Sound, are better than all you little wimps." The Sound ninja was all focused on Kabuto when he smiled from where he was standing. "I would have to disagree with that one." It made Dosu so mad that he charged the genin. Kabuto quickly jumped out of the way of the armored fist, but he went down on his knees and puked as he did so. Whatever strange thing happened, his glasses broke and fell off his face. Ino asked, "What the? What was that?" Naruto knew. You could tell by the way his eyes got smaller. Even though he hated the Kyuubi with a hatred equal to 1,000 suns, he had to admit that having advanced animal-like senses was pretty cool. When Dosu punched, the armored gauntlet on his arm made a single high-pitched sound that he could hear. As he was about to tell everyone what he had noticed, a new, authoritative voice rang through the room. "Alright you shits, get to your seats." As he walked into the room, everyone turned to see a man with scars all over his face that were almost too bad to look at. He wore a single bandana on his head and a big trench coat over his whole body. They also saw a lot of chunin appear on the floor above them, laughing at the chaos and hell they were about to unleash on the genin who didn't know what was coming. In their group were also the 2 would-be genin who had been guarding the door earlier and were now staring at Naruto with their daggers. He saw them and tried to smile to make them feel better, but it only made them madder. The man at the bottom of the room told everyone, with a cruel grin that made Naruto think of his housemate, "You all have exactly 60 seconds to get to your seats, starting from the moment I spoke, or everyone will fail." It worked like magic. No one moved, not even Naruto and Kiba, who are usually very loud. Everyone took a seat and was quiet. Your first exam will include a seating arrangement, the teacher said. Some people groaned, while others ignored it or just shrugged. The reason why is because this is a written exam. Come up here in a line, grab your number and a test sheet, and get back to your seat. You all may begin when I say so. When Naruto heard it was a written test, his eye twitched. Sasuke looked pale above him, and Sakura's mouth dropped. This got rid of their only chance of passing the test. Naruto was really bad at written tests. They got screwed. Naruto knew he was high on crap as he waited for his name to be called so he could get his seat and his test paper. Both Sasuke and Sakura looked down when they realized that their blonde teammate could pass a test and make a girl like him. It just wasn't their lucky day today. The girl Ibiki yelled, "Uzumaki Naruto." The boy with whiskers could almost hear the death march playing as he walked up to his test and seat. Sasuke gave him the death stare the whole time, and Sakura watched with worry. After he took his seat, he let himself take a quick look at the questions. They might as well put a stamp on his head that said, "failed," or, "dunce," just by looking at them. The questions were so far above his head that it would have been like a monkey jumping out of a tree to try to grab the moon. He had to be honest or cheat for this to work. "Hello, Naruto-kun," someone said in a soft voice. Suddenly pulling himself out of his dark thoughts, he looked to the seat to his right and saw Hinata, her eyes pale. She was just as scared as he was, if not more so, but being with her made him feel better. It could have been a good idea to get this seat. He said, "Oh, hey Hinata." With a sly grin. "Nervous?" She confirmed with a nod of her head. "Don't worry about," he told her. He thought to himself, it shouldn't be too hard to beat. "I hope at least." She whispered, "Okay," and turned back to Ibiki as he talked. "Okay, you jerks," Ibiki yelled through the crowd, making everyone quiet. Some of the genin turned pale with fear as he quickly told them the rules. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto were especially scared. If one member of a team failed, the whole team failed. Then Ibiki let them all go, and she heard the sound of pencils scratching against paper. Naruto was the only one who wasn't moving like crazy and didn't have a pencil. As he looked at the godforsaken piece of paper, he held his head tight and hoped that his eyes would light it on fire. No chunin could answer these questions because they were too hard. What did he need to do? There was only an hour left on the test, but that wasn't going to help him finish it. He hit his head on the desk, which made everyone look at him and laugh. To them, it looked like someone broke under the stress. For Ibiki, this was entertainment that was worth a lot. Any camera would have been nice for him. And to think that Anko gave this Naruto kid so much praise. He had talked with his coworker about what he was going to do this year because it was his first time running the first part of the chunin exam. While Mitarashi laughed, he told Naruto that he could do it, but he could tell that Naruto wasn't as good as she said he was. It looked like Anko owed him a lot of money. Naruto finally accepted that he would fail his whole team because he had killed enough brain cells. He leaned his head against his desk and let out a sigh of defeat. Every second that went by made him feel worse. Hinata looked at him with worry in the corner of her eye, but she didn't move her head because she was afraid she would fail. He saw it and smiled in a tense way. Outside of Kakashi, Aruka, Anko, Yamato, and Sarutobi, at least someone was worried about his well-being. Kakashi paced the room and looked at the time every once in a while. "You know, I'm worried about my team," he said. One of the few times in his life he wasn't deep in his favorite make-out paradise. "I wonder if I made the right choice when I let them take the test. I mean, Ibiki is the examiner for the first part." "Yeah, I know," Asuma said, flicking the end of his blunt. "I wonder how many genin are going to crap their pants. After all, this guy's a professional. He could make an S-class criminal spill his guts. He could even get them to talk about whether or not they wet the bed growing up." The copy. Kat and the other Junin sensei, along with Tenzo, were waiting for the annoying hour to end while hanging out in a lounge. Stress in the air was so strong that a butter knife could have cut it. Guy was even being nice and quiet because she was scared. Tenzo spoke up and asked his former captain, "Senpai, do you know that I supported your choice?" Kakashi stopped and only looked at him with one eye. "Yes, but I'm still the head teacher of the group. Most of the blame would fall on me." The group of Konoha Junin turned to face the door as Anko walked in, leaning on the doorway and smiling in a sneaky way. "And you'd become target number 1 should anything happen to the genin." After all, it was your example that led everyone else to make the same decision. Kakashi turned white and his one eye twitched with fear. She had a point. Even though she didn't say the man's name, he was pretty sure the crazy person was pointing the finger at Aruka. His mind wasn't happy about the idea of his face melting off his head. Not at all. He said, but for now, you can all chill out. Anko walked into the room and sat down on a chair. It made Kurenai wonder, why would that be? Anko pulled out a box of dango out of the blue and started eating the sweet dumplings. It only took her a second to empty the stick and throw it against a wall. Old Ibiki, she said, only likes to play mind games. I've known him to pry secrets out of class criminals by just staring at them, and knowing him he's got something up his sleeve. She laughed as she bit into another stick. Asuma asked with a raised eyebrow, what's so funny? Well, it's simple really. Naruto's going to pass this with flying colors. That person who smokes a lot got to laugh. Asuma pulled out a lighter for a new cigarette and said, you put too much faith in him. If anything, he's going to be the cause for Team 7's demise. A dango stick hit the cancer stick just as he put it to his mouth. It got stuck in the filter and wouldn't go any further. Asuma took the filter out of his mouth and stared with awe and fear at the stick stuck to it. The tobacco leaves flew to the ground. Naruto must have learned how to use senbon from her, not Hotaru as he said. When he looked at Anko, her smile had turned upside down, and she stared at him as if he had done something terrible. You don't give him enough credit, she told him as she stood up and left the room. I'd stay, but I have to prepare for the next part of the exam. Kurenai shook her head so hard she hurt. She had been on a few missions with Anko, so she knew how the woman could be. She was so shocked by how quickly she became attached to Naruto like he was a brother or sister. Asuma pulled out another cigarette and frowned at the waste of a good cancer stick. Damn, she's a crazy ass bitch, he said. Naruto was in a maze of mirrors that seemed to go on forever. It was weird to see himself so much. This place was dry, and the floor was a mirror. In Kyuubi's lair, the paths were bigger and covered in water. He thought he was walking on air until he saw his own reflection in the ground. Was he thinking about it? No. He could tell right away what was different. This could have been a dream. He didn't like it if it was, though. It was too creepy. He shook his head and ran down the first path that was closest to his foot. His reflection moved next to him as he looked out of the corner of his eye. He could see the reflection of himself following his feet when he looked down. Seeing all of these reflections was just weird. He felt 1,000 times better in his mind where the mirrors were broken. Just for a moment, Uzumaki stopped to catch his breath. He was stuck in a different part of the maze that had 4 different paths. All around him, crystals stuck out from everywhere, reflecting everything around them. He took one step, and thousands of others did the same. This place made him angry and happy at the same time. As if every mirror he looked at was a window into his own soul, it felt like it was a part of him. That's why he liked broken mirrors so much, they distorted his image so much that he couldn't see his flaws. It was one thing to see into someone else's soul, but it was a whole other thing to see into his. People naturally either looked away from or over their flaws when they saw themselves. Naruto turned his head away. It wasn't the right time to get deep. He ran instinctively toward the path his mind had already picked out. He ran as fast as he could because he thought someone or something was waiting for him. When he finally reached the end of the path, he saw a round room full of mirrors that looked a lot like the rest of the maze. The only thing that was different was that one old flower looked like it was attached to the wall with pure silver. Naruto had no idea what kind of flower it was, but it was very pretty. He looked into the mirrors as he slowly walked around the room. With each step, a loud echo moved through the room. The lines between the mirrors were the only thing that took away from his picture. Perfect look. He stopped when all of a sudden he saw himself standing over the flower and gently stroking the petals. When he turned back to look at the flower, he saw that it didn't have any souls or shadow copies. It looked like the dream was getting stranger as it went on. The blonde turned back to the mirror with a frown and almost jumped back when he saw himself. He put his hands to his eyes and moved his finger over his eyelids and cheeks. He then looked at himself in the mirror and did the same thing. Even though he wasn't giving them chakra, his eyes looked different. His irises were broken, but that wasn't what was throwing him off. It was the fact that the whites of his eyes turned into mirrors. He had cold tears running down his face, but they weren't there. He put his hand on the mirror, but when it moved, he jumped back. His careful eyes looked around the room to see what was going on and to see if the Kyuubi was there or if there was someone else there. He didn't feel the Red Fox Queen either way, which made him wonder what was going on. Naruto blinked when he felt something cool on his hand. When he picked it up, the mirror was stained with liquid silver from where he touched it. In a panic, he rubbed it against his clothes, which only spread the substance around. What the heck is this stuff? He asked himself, getting more and more angry as he rubbed it on. He laughed and looked at his hand. There were times when it looked like it never came off, but more of it still stuck to him. He got very excited when he heard a whisper. He quickly looked around the room as he tried to follow it, hoping to find someone who could tell him where he was. The flower in the middle of the room was all he could see, though. He let out a sadness-filled sigh and stared at it, thinking of ways he could get the silver off of himself. He frowned as he saw a single petal fall from the flower and melt where it hit the ground. That's when the worst part of this nightmare began. Suddenly, he could feel something cool going all over his body. He looked around with wide, scared eyes and saw the silver he had spread out on his body start to grow and slowly cover him. As he looked at his palm and saw it cover him with a liquid vine that spread out and wrapped around him, his breathing got faster. He rubbed at it, but it made the stain spread to more of his body. It moved slowly, and Naruto did everything he could to stop it. He could have used a kunai or his bare nails to scratch it off, but it hurt and made him feel like he was hurting himself. It hurt more and more the more he turned it down. Finally, the thing covered his whole body, and it moved slowly up to his face. Naruto was now really short of breath, and all of his muscles were stiff from fear. He couldn't do anything. He could do nothing but stand there as it took over. It went over his face, closed his eyes, and then went into his mouth. He couldn't taste it, but the way it felt made him want to throw up. Even though Naruto got down on his knees and tried to open his eyes, the liquid nightmare made it impossible. His chest shook as he tried to breathe, but it didn't help. Fear made him start to grate at his face, hoping to tear it off. It felt like he was clawing at his own face. In the end, he gave up and fell to the floor, killing himself. He was prepared to cry because he was about to leave the people he loved very much. He hadn't become Hokage the way he had hoped, and there was still so much more for him to discover. Why had it end now? He suddenly opened his eyes and looked into a mirror while he was lying on the ground. But it was over before he could see the picture in front of him. He woke up quickly and fell out of his chair in the real world. He gasped for air while holding his throat because he was lost. He wiped his forehead with sweat as he checked his face over and over to make sure the silver piss wasn't still there. Wow, that was a terrible dream. Once he knew he wasn't being suffocated by liquid silver, he could feel that the room was filled with so much killing intent that even Zabuza would have been scared to death. He slowly turned around and saw that he had made a lot of noise. Now everyone was staring at his sweaty body, and some of them were looking at him with mean looks. He looked at Ibiki and saw that the man wasn't happy about him falling asleep either. Some of the proctors were just waiting for the order to grab him and throw him out of the room like he was yesterday's trash. Shit, Naruto said to himself. He forgot about his short-lived fear of the room as he felt chakra being fed into his Kyokugen. It drove him crazy that always happened when he had a nightmare. His eyes chakra stopped being fed, his chair stood up straight, and he sat back down. I'll make sure you get extra attention when you leave if you bother my class one more time, Ibiki said, sending a chill down everyone's spine. Naruto took a deep breath. That was a real threat, not like what Anko said at home. Fear filled his face as he nodded and then turned back to his paper. He stared at it as if every eye in the room were drilling holes in the back of his head. From the corner of his eye, he saw everyone slowly go back to their work. It wasn't a good way to meet new people. At the sight of his test paper, he let out a sigh and turned his pencil around in his hands. Naruto didn't know it, but one of his two big secrets had just been found out because he didn't know what another pair of milky eyes could do. The person with those moon eyes next to him was in a lot of shock. The Hyuga heir had seen something amazing and beautiful. She wasn't proud of cheating with her eyes, but Naruto waking up out of the blue made her focus on him. Then her Byakugan let her see through the goggles for a short time. The things she saw confused and interested her at the same time. They were beautiful, and they made her wonder why Naruto would want to hide something like that. At first, she thought the eyes would be a clear, brilliant blue. So imagine her surprise when she saw the silvery pupils and irises that looked like broken mirrors. Then she saw him turn them off. She watched as the shards fell away, revealing the normal, happy blue she was used to seeing, but the pupils were still very sharp. Was that the reason he wore the glasses? Seeing how perfect the Byakugan is, she would gladly trade her cursed eyes for something so perfect. She had another thought. They were the same. The two of them had Dojutsu. He was the last of the Uzumaki, just like Sasaki was the last of the Uchiha. Did he have a clan like hers? She had a lot of questions and not much time to answer them, so she wasn't sure she'd get answers. Naruto had on goggles, which showed that he wanted to hide his eyes as much as possible. She was going to keep quiet for now, but she had to talk to him about it later. She would have to do it because she was so interested if she didn't. Naruto kept looking at his paper with a look that seemed like he was always angry. Aruka made him work like a dog at the academy before tests, but he still failed them. There was no way for him and his teammates to keep going. He felt something very strange and couldn't help but sigh. His Kyokugen saw more than one bloodline limit go off at the same time. Also, there seemed to be a lot of chakra in the air in the room. As if to see what was going on, he turned his eyes around just enough to avoid getting the boot. Naruto's eyes got bigger as he looked at what he was seeing. Sasaki used his Sharingan to watch someone write. Shikamaru used his shadow to make his teammates copy the answers after answering the questions. Kiba had Akamaru look at the answers and then bark them to him. Even Shino took part by using one of his little bugs to scout and then coming back to move his pencil with the right answer. Everyone was lying. Didn't they fear getting caught like he did? They were watched by chunin after all. At least Hinata wouldn't put herself down to that level. When he saw how big the veins were around her eyes, he quickly took off the smile that had been on his face. There was no way he could have seen the Byakugan in action, but he knew she had lowered herself to that level. A chunin hopeful close to him got a pencil stuck in his paper, and he quickly turned his head away. One of the proctors said, "You there, you were caught cheating, please leave." The hopeful left with a mean look on his face. Some of his teammates said mean things to him, but he didn't care. Naruto took a deep breath when he thought about losing. While he thought about this, he went back to his paper. The blonde looked at his paper and read the first question over again. What path does a shuriken need to take to reach its top speed? It's not clear how he could have known that. Why in the nine hells would he need to know? That would be a better question. It was easy. Just throw the star and hope it hits something. It was a tough question, but why would a chunin need to know? Naruto would have hit himself silly for not picking it up sooner if he wasn't in such a tough spot. They were way too hard, maybe even for a chunin. That made it look like the proctors wanted the genin to cheat. His thoughts were cut off quickly when more genin were failed. He could see them being picked off like flies being hit by an over-sized fly swatter as he looked around the room. After that, he gave it some more thought. In order to pass, you had to cheat. There was no way around it. No matter what, you would get caught. The only people who failed were those whose plans were too obvious or too stupid. He smiled like a fox. He really liked this kind of test. Even though all of his prankster instincts were screaming at him, he couldn't help but wonder how he was going to pull it off. If one bloodline limit was enough to get you through, just think how helpful it would be to have more than one. What should I do? Sharingan. No, that was too subtle, and that was Sasuke's way of doing things, so it was a big no. No. Hyakurai. That's not a good idea. That would be like putting a neon sign over his head that says, he did it. The Byaku chakra. That one didn't really help with this. It's because he didn't want Yamato Sensei to get into trouble. So Hyouden was left. He smiled as he thought of a way to carry out his plan. It was fancy enough for him, but not too fancy that anyone could link it to him. There was one big problem, though. It would be too hard for his Hyouden. He was going to focus on this more than anything else he had ever done. Hinata put down her pencil because she was done with her test. You could see what was going through Naruto's mind with her Byakugan. No one ever noticed how smart and sneaky he was. She thought about whether he should have been at the top of the class sometimes. She felt bad for him at the same time. He wasn't very good at written tests, and she remembered how often he failed them. Naruto. "Kun," she said in a low voice, making sure the examiners couldn't see her lips move. She looked at him from the corner of his eye as he tried to figure out what she wanted. While he had the chakra ready for his eyes, it got scattered in the air because of the disturbance. However, it didn't matter to him. He had enough to feed a whole group of chunin. He also kept his head down and asked, "What is it, Hinata?" "Chan?" She tried to stutter. "If you want, you can use my answers." He gave a sly grin. "I need you to hold that thought." Ibiki saw Naruto's smile below and knew right then that he had lost the bet with Anko. It was not a good sign for him or any of the other people taking this test. Hell was going to break loose in a big way, and he had no idea how or when it would happen. The mess it would make would not be pretty. And his favorite part was that the person who did it couldn't be found. With her Byakugan, Hinata could see Naruto putting chakra into his eyes, which broke his blue eyes and quickly turned them mirror silver. Next, though, something almost made her mouth drop. The pieces of his eyes fell out like soft snow, revealing stormy blue eyes that were not Naruto's. Naruto started to focus and do everything he could to keep his mind from wandering, because if it did, terrible things would happen. Under his desk, in the palm of his hand, water started to gather. He used the Hyoten's power to control elements to throw the water to the ground and start moving it away from him. It didn't matter where it was as long as no one found out it was him. Even Hinata, who had pale eyes, watched. She loved how the chakra filled the air and pulled the water particles out. Then she watched as the water moved like a snake along the ground, slowly but surely approaching its target. Naruto himself wore a mask that made him look focused. The water moved through the chairs so that none of the proctors, not even Ibiki, could see it. As it drank more water from the air, it got bigger, but it still moved quietly even as it got bigger. Naruto began to get sweaty. His only goal at this point was to see how far away he could control his Hyoten. He was doing everything he could to stop the air based chakra from joining with the water to make ice, but it wanted to do so anyway. It wasn't far enough away yet. Hinata still watched everything. Who taught Naruto such a high-level skill for manipulating chakra? She was curious. What he was planning was even more interesting. The small stream was as big as a big python by this point, but it kept going. It finally stopped 50 feet away from its owner, which was far enough that no one could catch it. The water clumped together into a wavy mass. Naruto laughed as he felt a random genin look at the lump of liquid from under his desk. This person had no idea what was in store for him. Once the genin looked under his desk and asked, "What the hell is this?" The boy caught the attention of every proctor, even Ibiki. The bear. Like man had a strong feeling that the trash can was now aimed at the fan and the person was just putting their arm out to throw it. Last but not least, Naruto gave up. He could not control the water because it was too far away, and he was having trouble focusing. When everyone looked over to where the explosion happened, they saw the boy and anyone else nearby frozen in a mass of ice crystals, or at least their frozen limbs stuck to the floor. Naruto grabbed Hinata's test paper in an instant and started writing down everything on it, which made her squeak in surprise. She had to agree that was as smart an idea as Shikamaru could have made. She was with her true love, who used a distraction to draw everyone's attention to one spot while he quickly got what he needed. Any Junin would have been proud of that plan. But the ice. That was two things at once. After reading about them, she knew that all of them were advanced bloodline limits. But that meant Naruto had those in his eyes. In his power, did Naruto have more than one limit? It became less clear to her as she thought about it more. The two girls looked at the ice pile in different ways. Sasaki was shocked and thought Naruto had just killed himself for the sake of the whole team. Sakura's eyes were as big as dinner plates and her mouth was almost on the ground. She had similar thoughts to Sasuke's. Ibiki was very angry. He looked at Naruto and saw that he was just fidgeting with his fingers. From where he was, he could see the whole answer sheet. The stupid little jerk used a distraction, but he had no proof at all. His debt to Anko seemed to be very large, and she would likely spend most of it on dango or alcohol. Seeing the corners of Naruto's lips start to move in a smile, he said, "If I find out who did this, I'll make sure your ninja career is over for good." The blonde's face lit up with a big smile, which let Ibiki know for sure it was him. He had no idea how the jerk did it for one of the few times in his life, and he would never know until the end of his life. The man who was hurt could only sit at his desk and stare at Anko's adopted little brother until class was over. As the time ran out, Naruto began to feel tense. He never replied to the 10th question, which was the only thing that was giving him trouble. It was blank and didn't ask him anything, which made him wonder what the proctor was planning. Even though she knew he did it, Ibiki kept staring at him. She just couldn't prove it. He laughed at that because the blonde had looked into the face of the devil, Aruka, when he was mad, so this was nothing compared to that. As it turned out, Aruka could use his Hyakuri to track everything Naruto did down the wire. If he was caught, it was because he hadn't gone into the sewers. He found it odd that Hinata kept trying to peek at him. Was there something on his face or on his nose? When he had that last thought, he begged the gods that the second wasn't true. When Sasuke and Sakura thought the judges would never find out that Naruto was the one who did the ice explosion stunt, they calmed down. But they had to praise their teammate for being able to pull off such a big stunt and still get away with it. That being said, it would be hard to find the original person if you didn't know who had the buy element. She looked at the time and smiled. He was excited about this part because it meant that the number of genin would be cut by more than half. He could also cheat that blonde kid this time so he wouldn't have to pay Anko any money. Everyone looked at him when he stood up and cleared his throat. He paid close attention in case someone threw him a curveball. He thought this was the big moment for everyone, since the test was almost over. But what did Ibiki have planned? Naruto knew the bear. Like man worked as an Anbu interrogator because Anko had only talked about him a few times. He was so good that he could even get a rock to spill its guts in less than 30 minutes. Listen up, everyone. If you don't pay attention, I'll throw you out right now. He yelled, making everyone sit down and hold their breath. As you all can see, the 10th question was left blank. Naruto said, "Shit," to himself as he took a quick look at the paper. That was the jalapeno on the sandwich that made it hot. The question was, do it or lose everything. He should have known. It was funny how this Ibiki guy made Anko look like she was soft and cuddly. The blonde saw Hinata's paleness get even worse as she looked at her. This question we saved for last because it's do or die. If you failed this question, you will never become a chunin in your ninja career, but should you decline to answer it, well, there's always next year. If you get it correct, though, you will pass this exam, but should you value your ninja career, the door is over there. Ibiki pointed to the door, which made a lot of people stand up and start the sad walk of failure. Genin teams slowly stood up, mad that they were too weak or stupid. Teams looked mad at each other, but some of the closest people looked like they could forgive. Naruto didn't want to turn into them in any case. He was going to answer that damn question no matter what. Sakura was having second thoughts above him. She may have cheated on the test by getting the answers ahead of time, but was she really that weak? Would her teammates forgive her and understand why she made the choice she did? Even with her Kinzokuten, she knew she wasn't strong. The poor girl sank even lower into her chair as she considered giving up. Hinata was shaking as Naruto looked at her. She was slowly lifting her arm up. He wouldn't let her do that, and she couldn't either. He wanted to do something nice for the Hyuga heir because she was so nice to him. Maybe all she needed was a little confidence boost, and who better to give it to her than the person who was already high on confidence. Naruto stood up and had a mean look on his face, so Ibiki looked at him. Over the blonde, Sasuke looked at him with murderous eyes and Sakura sighed. They both thought that their teammate was letting down, though Sakura was glad she hadn't stood up. Hinata looked at her crush with sad eyes and thought about ending things with him. They were at the very end of the list. Ibiki was about to fire the blonde when Naruto attacked. He added chakra to his hand and smashed the desk he was sitting at, splitting it in half and shocking Hinata who was sitting next to him. He yelled at the proctor, "Go to hell!" and put up a shaking fist. "I want to become Hokage, but I'm not going to get there unless I'm willing to take chance. So, wrong or right, shove that question up your ass." Naruto was happy and could see the proctor's eye twitch from where he was standing. On the platform above them, almost every chunin's mouth dropped at how rude the blonde was. There were still genin who were thinking about leaving, finding strength in the boy's words, or staying to see if the jerk got his behind handed to him for being disobedient. Hinata was amazed as she looked at Naruto. He seemed so brave that she could feel it flowing off of him. But that only made her resolve stronger. She was going to stay for her teammates and to be strong enough for Naruto to notice her. When Naruto did the trick with the ice, Sakura thought that if Naruto had bronze balls, then they would turn into diamond balls. But she also couldn't help but feel stronger after hearing what he said. She might be able to stay. Just for him and Sasuke. Ibiki didn't keep staring at the blonde. He looked around the classroom to make sure no one else was leaving. The boy's well-placed words not only scared everyone away, but also made them want to stay, which made him growl. It amazed me how someone so stupid could come up with a way to ruin a perfectly good plan. He finally let go and sighed. All of you who are here. Everyone, but Naruto, paid close attention to what he said. You all have passed. Temari yelled from her side of the room, what? Naruto's smart answer was, huh? As his arms went limp and his eyes blinked in surprise. After giving it a moment to sink in, he smiled so big it looked like it would split his face in half. He yelled, hell yeah. I passed. And made a victory sign. Naruto, you idiot. Sakura yelled from above him, and a part of her inner self joined in. Don't frickin' scare us like that. Her pencil was thrown faster than a kunai before he could duck. It hit the back of his head before he could avoid it. Naruto was sent into his already broken desk by the tiny pencil, which made a small fountain of splinters. When his female teammate lost it, Sasuke raised an eyebrow in admiration. He was glad to have Sakura by his side at times like these. Ibiki got mad at being ignored, so he cleared his throat. This made everyone look at him instead of the noisy newbies. While he paid attention, Naruto sat on the floor and rubbed the pencil-shaped bump on his head. After that, Ibiki felt the need to tell the class how he fixed the test. There was no doubt about it, the man was really good at psychology. So it makes sense that everyone flipped out when the test sheets were given out. It was a nightmare at the academy, so why not do it again? The questioner then showed them the scars. Naruto backed away in mild shock, and Hinata put her hand over her mouth in shock. They were both sure that one of the nearby genin had the bad luck to have his lunch come back to life and then fall to the floor. Now, many of the genin knew how much hell some ninjas could or would have to go through. Ibiki was about to finish explaining when a ball of clothes jumped out of the window and cut him off. It was Mitarashi Anko, who was introduced when someone threw a kunai with a banner on it to the ceiling. Everyone looked up and saw the person. She yelled at the class with her signature psycho grin, hello maggots. Don't get comfortable. Anko is here and the second part of the chunin exams will be starting. You're a little early, Ibiki told her as he moved the banner out of the way to see her. The Junin with duck hair looked at him and blinked her eyes to make sure she understood what he said. After a few seconds, she muttered, damn, and began pouting furiously. You. Anko heard a voice she knew accusing her. As she looked up at Naruto, who was pointing at her with an angry face, she blinked her eyes. She smiled when she saw her new little brother. She then made a move toward Ibiki, which made the big man pull out his wallet and take out a nice wad of cash. She added up the money with an even bigger smile on her face. That's when Naruto's mouth would have hit the ground if it wasn't stuck to his head. You were making bets on me. Anko looked at him lazily and then spoke in a loud voice that she knew would annoy the blonde. Ninjas from poorer shinobi villages looked at her with hunger as she waved some of her money around. Yep. This is my alcohol money, she said. He couldn't think of anything to say for one of the few times in his life that he could remember. It was like he couldn't think of a good way to come back, even when he thought about it now. He tried to talk, but his words wouldn't come out. He just shook his head and rubbed the side of his face in frustration. It was unclear to Hinata who this woman was, and her presence made her feel a little scared. But Naruto felt like he knew this person. That fact alone made her feel better. She could feel a comfort she was very used to when she looked more closely at both of them and studied their eyes. It felt like something Hanabi and she had in common, but they were much closer and warmer with each other. Was there a connection? No, Anko's pupils weren't silver like Naruto's were. How could they be so close? They looked like a big sister and a little brother. Ino shrunk away with wide eyes a few desks above Naruto and Hinata. If Anko was in charge of the second exam, everyone would have died. Shikamaru saw it and knew that things were going to get really, really bad. It wasn't like Ino was scared of anyone, but if she shook at the sight of this crazy woman, they were in big trouble. Sasuke could have screamed and pulled out his hair in public if he wasn't so calm. Then he would have hit his head against his desk over and over again. Putting on one of Anko's underwear and then falling into a pizza that was a few weeks old was still very fresh in his mind. He was still shaking at the thought of putting that moldy crust and clay, like pizza sauce, between his fingers. It goes without saying that he didn't really enjoy seeing Anko's bra either. Hell was about to come down on Earth in 9 different ways if she was in charge of the next part of the test. He could put the knife to his throat at any time. He was interested and looked at Sakura. She was pale and biting her lip. He wasn't the only one scared, though. At least she never had to go through what he did at Anko and Naruto's apartment, which was embarrassing. He would have been flashing the camera like the paparazzi who hang out next to the red carpet at the premiere of a new movie if there was one nearby. Anko yelled to the class, "All right, maggots." This made some of the weaker genin want to run out of the room to get away from the crazy Junin. "Join me outside, and I'll explain what the hell is going to happen. Just remember that I'm going to cut your numbers to less than half by the time I'm done with you." He couldn't help but turn white. The large group of genin had to follow Anko when she stopped in front of a big gate. Above the sign that said, "Forbidden," there was another sign that said, "Training Area 40." 1. Naruto was sure he saw a 100-foot long snake slithering nearby. Anko yelled at the group, "All right, maggots," with a smile that Naruto thought was more crazy than normal. "This is Training Area 40. 1, lovingly called the Forest of Death. There's a reason it's called that." She stopped talking when she heard someone laugh. It seemed like something fragile had broken in her mind. No one made fun of her training area, not even the blonde kid with Kyokugen eyes who did it. "Yeah, that sounds so scary," Naruto said sarcastically, which made the other genin laugh even more. But some people looked at him like he had just picked up a shovel to dig his own grave. He quickly turned his head to the side to avoid the kunai that his sister had thrown at him, which took away his carefree smile. He knew he had said something wrong when he looked from the kunai to her. At this very moment, though, Anko let a bunch of bad things into Naruto's mind. 3, 2, 1, Sasaki counted with his signature smirk. Sakura looked at him funny and raised an eyebrow. Just 1 second later, she found out what Sasaki was counting down to. As Naruto held the cut on the side of his cheek, he yelled, "You sadistic bitch." "What the hell was that for?" Anko replied, "For making fun of my training area." Naruto yelled back, "Why the hell does it matter?" He could feel chakra being fed to his Kyokugen. "And they're off," Sakura said in a low voice, shaking her head in shame. All of the genin turned their heads to look at the smack talk. When someone made a comeback, they looked at the other person for a moment. It wasn't just calling each other names. There was a lot of shaming about how the other person was. Someone made fun of Naruto's height, which hurt him, but Anko quickly responded with something about how messy she was. "I know where the hell you sleep," Anko yelled, which made all the genin ooh, as if they had been hit hard. They didn't want this crazy woman to know where they slept because they were afraid of what she might do. "I know where you sleep too," said Naruto, "but I wouldn't step foot in there, not unless I want to step on one of your dirty thongs." Anko turned red, both in anger and shame. She felt bad that she hadn't thought of something better. When he felt like it, Naruto could be a funny little jerk. All of the would be ninjas looked at Naruto in shock, thinking that he had just beaten probably the craziest person in the world. They both shivered and cringed at the thought of seeing something like that. What terrible things did their friend have to go through just to get to bed? "Here's the kunai you dropped." Suddenly, there was a feeling of unease in the air, and most of it came from Anko, who locked up. It was so close to Naruto that he could taste it in the air, and for some reason, he felt terrible fear fill his mind. But he couldn't for the life of him figure out what was wrong. He saw the kunai and followed the pale red part that was holding it. That's how he found a grass nin holding it with just his very long tongue. He knew something was wrong with Mr. Freaky just by looking at the genin. Even just looking at him or her made Naruto feel much more scared. He couldn't be sure, but he thought it was probably a man. "Thanks," Anko said slowly as she carefully took the kunai in her hand. The blonde saw the woman death grip it, which seemed to be on the caution for no reason. She kept her eyes on the genin the whole time she put the knife away, and then her hand went to a certain spot on her shoulder without thinking about it. It seemed to Naruto like that was where the cursed seal was kept. His discovery that she rubbed or gripped on it when she was very uncomfortable or nervous happened just a few days ago. This time, she felt a mix of those two feelings. When Anko looked around, she felt more uncomfortable than she had in a long time. She looked at the tongue's owner with eyes like a cougar as it moved back into its mouth. She thought she remembered someone she hated using that technique in a very strange way. She tried to dismiss it in her mind as a coincidence or as the genin just changing the attack to fit his needs, but it kept coming back to her. There was no way it was a coincidence, but Orochimaru might be brave enough to go back to the house he broke into. But she wasn't able to prove it yet. Okay, she said, getting back to a professional tone while still paying close attention to the ugly genin. I'm feeling nice today, so I'm going to give you all an extra day to pack up what you need. Prepare for 5 days. Meet me here at the same time tomorrow, and if you aren't here on time, I'll fail you. After saying, how sad, everyone looked back at the genin. The sound of that high-pitched, squeaky voice made the hairs on the back of Naruto's neck stand on end. I was hoping to fight today. Oh well, tomorrow should come quite quickly. Instead of speaking, Anko waved her hand and told all the genin to leave, sending them running like cockroaches in a well-lit room. She turned to leave, but before she did, she waved her head for Naruto to follow. He walked up to her and they were out of earshot of everyone else. Anko spoke to him quietly after that. She said in a whisper, listen, and listen well. Naruto paid close attention because he knew this was a very important moment. I wasn't supposed to give you that extra day, but you better keep your ears on me, or I'll never forgive you. He was sure she meant what she said. The usually playful aura around her was gone, replaced by something more like a very careful prudence that came from being a chunin for years. Anko was fully in shinobi mode, but what was so scary about that genin? I want you, Sakura and Sasaki, she said, to be absolutely cautious inside that forest. I may be worrying about nothing, but better to be careful than careless. If you meet that genin again, I want you to run away as fast as possible. Naruto said, don't tell me twice. He could feel her warning sinking in like a rock in water. They didn't know it, but a genin with a half sun and half moon symbol on her headband was watching them. It wasn't just the creepy genin that put them in danger. As he walked away, the ugly genin thought to himself, my student has become very stupid. I thought she'd be much smarter than that to attach herself to someone, especially someone like that. And as he turned the corner, he sank into the building, becoming one with the bricks like water. He came out the other side quickly, and as soon as he did, one of his hands went up to his face. If anyone had been in that supply room at the time, they might have been horrified to see the face peel off to reveal pale skin and yellow snake eyes. The snake told itself in a much lower voice, tomorrow will be a lot of fun. Sasaki-kun will be there to entertain me, and maybe even become my new container. He put his hand to his chin and thought of something also fun to do. While he was gone, Anko got too soft. This was the right time to remind her who her sensei was. Maybe while I'm at it, I'll kill her little toy. After all, he's on the same team as Sasaki-kun. Whatever this dark being was, he sunk into the ground and laughed uncontrollably. He was sitting in the middle of the living room with his back to the coffee table and his head on it. He was watching Anko drink like she was crazy while she did it. To his surprise, it was only 2 p.m., which he thought was too early to get drunk. On the other hand, his older sister figure wasn't joking when she said she would buy alcohol with the money she won. After changing into a tank top and beige shorts to make herself feel better, she went outside. Naruto could see her purple underwear because the zipper and button were undone, but he wasn't too sensitive to seeing her because he hadn't spent much time with Anko yet. It was terrible. She had no respect for herself at all. Thank goodness he hadn't seen her naked yet, because that sight would make him want to cut out his eyes right away. Anko's almost last bottle of rice beer is now empty. Because she had been drinking so much, her cheeks were now red. Her strength was so great that she could hold more than 15 bottles of the liquid without throwing up. Naruto had to tell her that. He thought she was on her 24th bottle, which was her last one before she got completely drunk after the 11th. She turned the bottle over and shook it to get the last drop out because she didn't want to waste any of it. As she shook her head and threw it over her shoulder, nothing came out. It flew out the window. The boy with the tan heard a cat hiss and then yowl when it was hit by the glass. I hate my job, Anko said out of the blue. It was clear that she was drunk. Even though she was sitting down, she was starting to sway and her speech was slurred. Why would that be? Naruto asked with a smile. It was best to go along with it because Anko was now very unpredictable. He personally knew that there were 3 types of drunks, the quiet ones, the emotional ones, and the angry ones. The emotional ones were the funniest, especially when they were talking about their love problems with someone who was usually serious and tense. It was worth a million ryo to see them lose it. He knew Anko loved beer because there were so many cans and bottles of it in their apartment, so he hadn't been able to put her in between these groups until now. Her whine was, because I don't get to see Aruka-kun that often. She tried to rest her head on her hand but missed and hit the table instead. She just kept her head on the table, though. Why? Do you like Aruka-sensei or something? He asked, scared of the answer but still interested. Like him? She asked, sounding a little insulted, even as she stood up, wobbling like anyone who has had too much to drink. Anko finally yelled, I absolutely love him. And raised one hand to make the point stronger. That's nice, Naruto said out loud. That was not good. Aruka was going to end up married to a crazy woman in the future. He would be the only one who is sane. But this moment finally helped Naruto figure out what kind of drunk Anko was. She was an emotional drunk. He laughed to himself as he thought about all the **tea she'd say. All he needed was a bottle of tequila to start having fun. He was going to ask his older sister for more ways to blackmail her that he could use later, but she lost her cool because she was drunk. It looked like Anko's eyes rolled back into her head, and she fell backwards into a stack of cans while smiling like a fool. She must be dreaming about Aruka. Mostly to get back at her for throwing the kunai at his cheek, he thought for a second about getting a permanent marker and putting it to her face. But he decided to value his life a bit more. When Anko had a hangover, he would be less stable and more likely to kill him out of anger. He thought to himself, what am I going to do for the rest of the day? First, he had to go to town and get enough food and water for 5 days. In the forest of death, things were going to get bad. He thought that Anko might have taken him out for supplies if she wasn't going to be asleep until morning. He shook his head and grabbed his black jacket off the couch. He walked to the front door, but not before putting on his goggles. He turned back to his sister and thought about how nice it would be to pick up Anko, throw her on her bed, and leave some aspirin for later. But he didn't want to be that nice. Also, she had to go through pain to learn that drinking too much was bad for her. After that, he was outside in the middle of the day. Naruto smiled as he walked through the streets with a brand new backpack full of supplies. Hotaru had given him the bag with a smile. It could keep out the weather and had a lot of pockets that could hold food, a sleeping bag on top, weapons, and a lot of other things. The best part was that he saved money on it. When he went to see Tenten, Hotaru told him that she was training because she had already passed the first part of the test. After one last congrats on passing the first part of the test, Naruto was on his way to his favorite place to train. The blonde stopped abruptly when he felt a bloodline limit on the rooftops above him. He couldn't quite figure out who it was, mostly because the owner was just out of range of the limit. Naruto quickly shook his shoulders and went on, putting it off as just some random person. That was another strange thing he learned about his Kyokugen's ability to sense limits. It could only do certain things, and the closer he was to someone who used limit, the more he knew about them. In one part of the radius, all he could do was sense them. As he got closer, he could pick out the bloodline signature and even tell what kind it was. And still closer, he could feel what the person was feeling. Bloodline limit owners often brushed against the edges of his sense, but he didn't give them much thought. He kept walking with happy steps, but he stopped with a smile when he found some extra money in his pocket. He bent down to pick it up, though, and his silver eyes let him see something. The person stopped when he did. Naruto let out an angry grunt when he realized someone was following him. It was clear that this person was a tracker because normal bloodline users, like Aruka, would have stupidly stumbled upon his radar otherwise. Since he wanted to get rid of the bothersome person, he pretended that he had never felt anyone. He went in a bunch of different zigzag paths and even took a few random alleys he knew about from trying to get away from a mad chunin when he was in the academy. Even so, the person kept going like a bloodhound following a scent. He tried everything, even jumping backwards, to catch the unknown person off guard. He got close, but the person moved away before he could figure out who it was. "Ah, that's it." Naruto finally yelled in frustration, grabbing his head in a funny way that made a few people around him raise their eyebrows. Some of them thought the outcast in the village was finally losing it. He jumped to the roofs and started moving very quickly toward Training Area 7. While Naruto was moving quickly, he hoped that the person would lose track of him. But the person stayed close enough that it was like swatting an annoying bug off the edges of his radar. He finally got to the training grounds and took a deep breath. Naruto thought he had gotten rid of the annoying person, but he groaned and put his hand on his head when he felt the person step just outside of his Kyokugen's range again. He stood up, clenched his teeth, and threw his new bag next to the monument. This person should have gotten a royal ass kick for bothering him at a dango shop more than Anko. Naruto yelled from one direction to the other, "Okay, I know you're there. Come out." He lost it when no one came out. Out of the blue, he reached into his senbon holster and threw one of the needles at the person who was hiding behind a tree. Even though the person he saw wasn't quite what he was expecting, he wasn't upset when someone fell to the ground in shock. Hinata, who had pale eyes, squeaked and jumped back up, putting both hands over her mouth. After all the training she did with Kurenai Sensei, she didn't think Naruto would pick up on her that way. She had to know about this because it was one of the 10 most embarrassing things that had ever happened to her. She had to find out more about those beautiful silver eyes even after they left to get ready for the next day. He thought to himself, oops. He might have been nicer if he knew it was Hinata. He smiled nervously and rubbed the back of his head in shame. Sorry. I don't take too well to being followed. She stuttered, sorry, and started to move her fingers around. Naruto thought it was kind of cute. But I had to know about them. Naruto turned his head to the side in surprise. Know about what? Why? Your eyes, she said quietly, getting even smaller. She had only decided a few minutes ago to leave her comfort zone in order to learn more about Naruto. Naruto looked shocked for a moment, but then he smiled in a mean way, which made her worry. He proudly snapped his fingers and said, "Oh, you must be talking about my Hyouden." In these kinds of situations, Yamato Sensei taught him some excuses. If someone saw too much, the rule was to give them a small piece of the whole pie. Ice manipulation is pretty cool, huh? Hinata played with her fingers some more. She was sure of what she saw. While it wasn't an elemental bloodline limit, Naruto's statement made her think that this was likely his second limit. But, what about your Dojutsu? She asked again, but this time it was 1,000 times kinder than some of the other things Team 7 members did. Naruto knew he could take whatever they gave him, but Hinata was different. He couldn't touch her without feeling bad. Naruto told her, "I don't know what you're talking about," shrugging off what she said. This was the last thing he could do. My eyes are still blue. The princess knew she wasn't making progress. It only showed how hard Naruto was working to keep his amazing gift a secret from everyone, and she really meant everyone. But she didn't get why they were hiding it. It was very important for Naruto to get away from her now. Most of the time, he would rip someone apart if they knew that much. But now his secret was out in the open, and the one person he couldn't willfully hurt found out about it. He asked himself, how did she find out? He almost hit himself because he knew he should have paid more attention to the people around him while he looked at her more closely. Her eyes. His eyes were wide with a range of feelings as he asked quietly, "You saw them, didn't you?" Hinata gave him another soft nod of the head because she was scared of what he might do. She could tell from the sound of his voice that he was shocked. It was one of those times when she had to be very careful on the water or else blow everything out of the water. He was more open to danger than he had ever felt before. Kyuubi? Could she see it? What else did she see about him that he didn't? It was so strange to see the mask he had worked on his whole life fall apart in front of him, and all because of a quiet little girl he had never thought to avoid. Hinata had a great thought at that very moment. Maybe Naruto thought his eyes looked awfully much like hers. She shook her hands so hard they looked weak as she took the leap of faith. I thought why? Your eyes were very pretty. She said something that caught the blonde by surprise. He thought his eyes were beautiful at first, but the more he learned about them, the less beautiful they seemed. His memory would always be stained with Mizuki's death, even though he didn't like the man. But if someone told him that flowers sometimes had thorns, he would appreciate the beauty of it even more. He took off the mask for the first time in a long time that he could remember. Hinata couldn't figure out what Naruto was feeling. It could have been a mix of longing, sadness, or just blank amazement. You do? His voice got rough. Hinata did nothing but smile and nod her head. Being around Naruto who wasn't acting crazy and irritable was different, but she felt sorry for him because he seemed so insecure. They were so much alike, even more than she thought. I hate them, he whispered, his eyes getting teary. He knew she understood how he felt because she said, I hate mine too. He didn't know how to look at her now. She didn't like her eyes? Why? He smiled at her and said, I like them. Toshiko was the one who smiled next. Yes, they were a lot alike. Naruto took off his glasses, which let Hinata see the mirror silver. He cried too, but they were tears of joy at the same time. It was nice to feel the cold steel against his face, and the fact that they weren't sad tears made them feel even better. And they both smiled. Naruto was happy because he had a new friend who was the same age as him. Hinata gave him a soft smile because she could be with him now. At the same time that he looked at Anko, Aruka put his hands on his sides. He leaned over her body and watched as she snored loudly and drooled down the side of her face. The teacher snapped his tongue at the way she behaved. He had to wake her up right now. In order to do this, he picked her up and hit her in the face a few times. But all that did was make her head hang off to the side while she snored. At that same time, Aruka found out she talked to herself while she slept. Why are you wearing that funky underwear? Huh? Aruka asked herself out loud. What in the world did she dream about? He didn't even care about what was going on in her mind at that moment. He sighed as he picked her up and put her on the couch because he wasn't getting what he wanted. He made sure to get some aspirin and water before he left, and then he put them on the TV stand next to the couch. He was going to have to keep an eye on Anko's drinking from now on. He took one last look at the apartment. Anko was a slob, Naruto was right. She wasn't the best role model either, but at least his fake little brother knew better than to do the things she did. Even back then, she cared more about his health than almost everyone else in the village put together. They both needed someone who cared and loved them. Anko needed him to get over the hurts of the past. He let out one last sigh and shut the front door. He tried to find Naruto so he could train him one last time, but he couldn't find the little monster. Someone told him that Anko was smart for giving everyone one day to get ready for the next part of the test, which was going to be much harder. He checked his watch and saw that it was 10 past 7. It was getting close to sunset, which meant the sun would be out all night. Aruka jumped to the rooftops and used his Hyakurai to try to quickly find the blonde who was causing trouble. W. Why D? D. Did you name it K? Kyokugen? Hinata asked as she sat on a rock and watched Naruto pick up some flat stones and skip them across the water. She hugged her knees tightly. The sky was a beautiful summer orange color, and it was getting dark. Well, I want to say I named it, Naruto said, looking out into the water as if he was hoping to see Haku. But I think Haku did it more than I did. I named it after him after all, mostly because of the flowers he had by the mirror. Hinata loved the name so much because it was so poetic. She didn't know what it did yet, though. They hadn't talked about their limits yet because they felt like it was rude to even bring them up. They had learned a lot about each other while they were together. They both had few close friends who seemed to care about their well-being and were looked down upon by most people. Even her own clan was mean to Hinata, which is something Naruto would never want to happen to anyone. He didn't want his own family to dislike him. His life was better than Hinata's, so he was glad that only the village did. The two of them didn't like being pitied. Naruto didn't like it when people pretended to care about him just because he was in trouble, and Hinata didn't like it because it made her feel even weaker than she already did. Aside from that, they talked about everyday things like what they liked and what they did in their free time. They also learned more about the people who cared about them. It was different for them to talk like they were with a close friend. But that's what they became, best friends. Two outsiders looking for comfort in each other. Both of them were very happy. So, what does your limit do? Naruto asked her with the silvery eyes Hinata loved so much. It's called B. Byakugan, she said softly, turning her eyes away. It allows me to see 360 degrees, and I can also see through things. The best thing about it is that it can see the chakra coils, which lets us use our jukin to block other people from using chakra. We can also see a long way off. Jukin, Naruto asked with his mouth moving, what is that? She went on to say, it is a form of taijutsu that attacks from the inside out. Most taijutsu is meant to hurt from the outside and break bones, but Jukin doesn't do that. He smiled and sat down next to her to watch the sun go down. That's pretty cool, he said. Well, I guess it's my turn to explain mine. He then went back to the beginning and told everything he knew about his Kyokugen. Naruto told her about how he learned what it did, his trip to Zabuza and Haku's hideout, his meeting with Yamato Sensei, and anything else he could think of. He left out the parts about the Kyuubi because it was one thing to talk about his limit and something else entirely to talk about his inner demon. Hinata held on to every word he said during the whole explanation. That much power. She thought about how he could grow so much by getting another limit, and she also thought about how many people would be after his head. There were many threats against him from the clans in Konoha. They either asked him to marry them or said they would steal his blood. She felt terrible for him, though. He knew Haku, and that person died that day. He seemed so nice, both on and off the battlefield, that she wished she could have met him at least once. It was amazing how pure the Hyouden user was. Many people wouldn't be able to say they'd never killed a shinobi, not even until they were dead. The thought of Naruto being in danger came back to her with even more force. If anyone learned about the Kyokugen, there would be another great shinobi war, all for the sake of the life force that flows through his veins. Naruto. She screeched in fear. He just laughed. They would have to live through it even if they wanted my blood. When Mizuki Teme put some on a kunai and stabbed himself, he died because it was so poisonous. The blonde shivered when he thought about Mizuki's black, dead eyes staring back at him. That wasn't my favorite memory. Hinata said to herself, I didn't think he was a good teacher anyway, which made her new best friend laugh out loud. No, I didn't think so either. By the way, did you know that Aruka Sensei is an S class ninja? Really? Yes, I got my Hyakurai from him. I just wished I had paid more attention in class. I might have worshipped the ground he walked on if I knew that. They just sat there and enjoyed each other's company for a few minutes. They both watched as the sun slowly went down until it was halfway below the horizon. As time went by, it got lower and lower. Hinata was ready to tell Naruto that she still liked him, but she wasn't going to. She wasn't going to let her feelings get in the way of their friendship, and she didn't want to bother him every time they got together. At the moment, she would push those feelings away, but only for a short time. In the end, they would rise up again, but not yet. Then she had another thought about her friend that she wasn't sure she understood. He was free to copy any bloodline limit, but not hers yet. Why would he do that? It would have driven everyone else crazy. Naruto Kun, she asked, turning away from the sun in the hopes that he would answer. YH. Haven't you circa copied my limit yet? Naruto looked at her as he thought about what he was going to say. She didn't know how deep the answer was. That's why he hated using the Sharingan and why he wanted to ask people for permission to do something even though he could just steal something for himself. He knew just what to say to explain it. In a way that Hinata couldn't understand, he said, whenever I copy someone's bloodline limit, it's like taking a piece of that person and carrying it with me everywhere I go. He thought about all the people he knew in the limits he had copied. You had to get really close to someone to copy such an important part of them. People were supposed to be very polite when they mimicked others, but it was also a deep sign of sincerity to want to be just like someone else so much that you copy them. That's why I hate the Sharingan, Naruto said again, this time looking up at the sky. The brighter stars were just barely visible through the thin layer of sunlight. It was the first limit I copied, but... He struggled to find the right words. It felt like I stole it from Sasaki, but I know. I'm sure that we are the most alike people here. That's the reason I hate him. I really want to ask him to be like him, but I don't want to. She got it now. The way he felt was like he always had pieces of someone's soul with him. Because of this, he didn't jump at the chance to copy someone's end. It was Hinata who stood up, which made Naruto look at her. Please copy mine. He couldn't help but smile at her in a sad way. Naruto stood up and cracked his eyes open at the same time. He nodded his head. The young heiress found it strange to look into his eyes. She was told to look away, but she couldn't help but stare at them in a hypnotic way. After a few seconds, Naruto finally nodded his head to show that he was done. He could now use another form of Dojutsu. He told her, "Thank you, Hinata-chan. Thanks for being my best friend." The use of the suffix made Hinata blush, and she couldn't help it. Yes, they were best friends, but they were also outcasts in the society they worked so hard to serve, and they planned to stay together through good times and bad. When they both turned around, they heard someone clear their throat, and Aruka smiled at them. He told her gently, "I'm sorry Hinata, but I think you should go home before your dad finds out you've been out for so long." The girl looked sad and down at the ground. "But don't worry. After this business with the chunin exam, you two should be able to hang out more often." She smiled softly and looked up again before nodding. Naruto and Aruka waved at her as she walked out of the clearing. After looking at the blonde with the puzzle face, the scarred chunin turned his attention back to her. "Hinata found out, didn't she?" The question came from Aruka, who saw Naruto's goggles around his neck, letting the dim light shine on his eyes. Naruto just smiled and said, "She won't tell anyone, though." "Even then, I'm still scared," Aruka said out loud. "I really think she found out with her Byakugan, but if she did, then her clan members could also find out. That being said, be very careful whenever you're with Hyuga members." The blonde said, "Yes, again. But I'm glad you have a new friend," Aruka said with a bright smile. Then he watched as the sun went down behind the horizon, making it dark outside. "I meant to give you some last-minute training, but I found you a little late. What about going to Ichiraku's for dinner?" In that moment when Naruto smiled, Amino almost felt bad about what he had said. Jiraiya took a deep breath as he walked through the gates of Konoha. He was walking slowly because he had just run through almost the whole land of fire. It felt good to be at home. He gave a sexy smile when he thought about being at the dedication of the new bathhouse. There would be a lot of naked women there. What wonderful things he could learn for his books. Things were getting better. He would be there tomorrow, but after such a long trip, he needed to rest now. Before he went any further, he stopped and looked up at the Hokage monument. He focused on Namikaze Minato's face of course. He told himself, "I'm only home for a little while, son." Naruto jumped up, making sweat fall all over his bed. He was scared as he thought about the vision he had just had. He ran his hand across his face as he felt cold metal press against his cheeks. Tears of silver ran down the side of his face. He hadn't cried, not even in his dream, so that wasn't true. He sighed and put his head on his pillow as he thought about the dream. Every time he slept, it was on his mind. In the last 2 hours, he woke up at least 6 times. He didn't want to sleep again because he knew he would have another fit. That's the same one he felt during the chunin exam. The same thing happened in his dream. He ran through a maze of mirrors until he got to the room where the silver flower bloomed. He would mess around inside until things went strange. He was sucked into the silver liquid or whatever it was, just like the first time and every time after that. One thing changed, though. Every time he woke up, he was crying silver tears. He was getting scared about it. There had to be more to this dream. But who could he talk to about it who wouldn't freak out and could tell him what it might mean? Having dreams often didn't mean anything, but if you kept having them, there was something strange going on. He had to get it. He sighed and got out of bed to change. Plus, he was afraid of that dream, but he couldn't explain why. He couldn't go to sleep now. He quickly took off his pajamas and put on his clothes while he thought about other things. It wasn't okay to talk to Anko. He hoped that she wouldn't wake up until the morning because she was still drunk. If she got drunk in the afternoon of the day before, her moments would sometimes last until noon the next day. Naruto turned his head away. For a while, he had to keep the alcohol away from her. He opened the window, put on his black jacket, and left. In the dark, he looked like a shadow because of his dark clothes. He might have only needed to clear his mind. The moon was bright in the sky, and the air felt cool against his skin. It was nice and cool. He could take off his glasses and show the world what he saw because no one else was around. He got to a certain rooftop with a view of the town square. There were shops and lights all over the area, but since it was almost midnight, no one was there. It made the area look both creepy and calm. At night, the noise and activity stopped, and there was complete peace and quiet. There was no light on the stands, but street lamps put out a soft glow that the moon couldn't reach. A fountain in the middle of the square played soft music, which made the area even more peaceful. In his younger years, when he had bad dreams and couldn't sleep, he would come here off and on. It was the only way for him to visit here without being made fun of or cursed at. He could also let his eyes shine without putting his life in danger. He sighed again as he thought about the second part of the test and what his sister had said. That Kusa genin scared him, and Naruto didn't mind listening to Anko for once because of that genin. It was hard to describe how that made you feel. It was like walking close to a poisonous snake that planned to kill you when the time was right and the target was close enough. Then he thought about Hinata and how quickly they became close friends. They were a lot alike. He finally had someone his own age to lean on who understood the pain he was feeling, the pain of being alone and being hated every day. It was nice. On the other hand, Anko could tease him about getting a girlfriend. Even though he wasn't that old yet, the thought of it made him blush. It was by far the worst thought he had that he was becoming more and more interested in Sakura and Sasaki. As time went on, they became friends after the wave mission and got closer as time went on. He got sick from it. He should have made Sakura like him, not that jerk. It was nice of him, while the other guy was rude. What did the jerk have that he didn't have? How you look. He thought about it a lot, and the more he thought about it, the better idea he got. He was going to drive a wedge between them. He heard the sound of a laugh that he knew all too well. Right away, he felt bad about thinking that, but it was too late to feel bad about having those feelings. He jumped when someone touched his cheek. He got very excited when he saw the Kyuubi standing behind him. She was out of her kennel, so he yelled, "What the hell are you doing out of your kennel, bitch?" He backed away for fear that she would touch him. She told him as she crossed her arms, "That's so funny that I'm laughing inside." Naruto punched her in the face and said, "I'll stop you before you hurt the village." He then pulled out a senbon. Instead, he only grabbed at air in vain. Kyuubi held up his weapons and asked, "Looking for these?" After that, she threw them across the roof, making a mess of the metal. Such dark thoughts for someone who keeps pushing me away. As she looked at him, her eyes briefly turned cat-like. Admit it. You're just like me, a person with desires. You want them fulfilled. I can do it. You know it. Naruto closed his eyes, but she was gone as soon as he did. The next second, he felt warm arms around him and then warm air on his neck. It only took a second to figure out that his worst nightmare was doing everything on this list tonight. "Come on, Naruto," she said in a very enticing voice. Naruto felt cold when he heard her sweet voice. It was so hot that she pressed her face against his neck and made his skin crawl. "Why don't you get mad more often? The more angry you get, the closer you get to me." "That's why I'm here," she said. "Because your black emotions call so longingly to me." Naruto jumped away from her, scared and with wide eyes. Even though she looked mad that he got away from her, it was only for a second. Then she smiled sneakily, like she had won a game. "I've always been interested in you, my container," she told him as he took a step back. "You teeter so close to the edge," she said. Naruto could feel himself pushing against the railing as she spoke. "You're a being between the light and darkness, a person stuck in the twilight." His nerves made him ask, "What are you talking about?" As he pressed harder into the cold metal of the railing to try to get away from Kyuubi as she got closer. "To deny me, Naruto, is to deny your darker half," she said next, stroking his cheek and making him flinch. She whispered in his ear, "The farther away from me you are, the closer you are to the light. Even the light devours." As she took a step back, she smiled in a sneaky way that didn't look good for Naruto. "They call me a monster? What a joke. You need me, Naruto. The closer to the light you step, the more likely you are to succumb to insanity." He opened his eyes and she was gone. Naruto turned his head to look for her, but the scattered senbon were the only sign that he had seen her. That couldn't have been a dream, he said to himself with wide eyes. The thought of her skin against his made his skin crawl. He longed for that feeling with all his heart, but he also wanted to get away from those thoughts. He was just something she used for her own gain. She didn't have any other reason to act that way. Like all demons, she was just trying to find a way to get away. He slowly made his way to the senbon and started the hard work of collecting them. His hands were shaking. It was hard to put them in the holster because they moved when he touched them. Still, who wouldn't be scared out of their mind after something like that? He locked the being inside himself, but she got out and talked to him and touched him. He could feel the longing, and he was sure that the Kyuubi could too. He didn't like her because she knew exactly what to say, do, and how to touch just the right buttons to get what she wanted. He didn't like being honest about these feelings, but it was getting harder to say no to her advances. Sitting on the railing, he thought about what had happened while still being out of breath and sweating. After taking back control of his body, Naruto thought and scrunched up his face as he looked over everything. The Kyuubi lost his mind. That much was clear, but he did notice something strange. Even though she was outside, she didn't have that aura of power that she cast around herself in his mind. Still, it didn't explain a lot of what happened. A voice next to his ear said, "Not a good move, Silver. Eyes. You shouldn't be by yourself." She caught him off guard and made him jump. He landed 20 feet away, his heart racing and adrenaline pumping through his body. Naruto looked everywhere for the bad guy but couldn't find anyone. One more thing that the voice said, almost amused, "It's also not good to talk to yourself." But then again, the burst of chakra that made your Senbon cartridge launch in the air was pretty weird. That does answer one question. He had to have thought about it. That didn't explain how the Senbon cartridge got off his belt, though. He then thought of what the voice had called him, Silver. Eyes. He swore and quickly put on his water goggles. There was someone out there who knew his secret. Either he killed them or caught the person who did it and took them to the Hokage, his sister, or someone else he knew. He yelled at his hidden enemy, "Come out, you coward. Take off the goggles, and I'll put mine on," a woman's voice shot back, sounding a little naughty and funny. He couldn't help but take them off. That person already knew his secret, so they might as well. He slowly put his hand to his eyes and took off his clothes, showing the Kyokugen in all its glory. Without the glasses, he felt naked. If he fought, that would be the first time anyone saw his eyes fully open. Could someone figure out what powers he has just by looking at them? It was funny when the person showed up, but Naruto had no idea who it was. The girl in front of him was about his age and height, and she was putting on the glasses she had promised, a pair of welder's goggles that blocked out her eyes. "Sorry," she stated, "but without them, I have trouble controlling my bloodline limit." Naruto looked at her all over, marking anything that stood out in case he had to figure out who she was. This little girl was about the same height as Naruto and very skinny. Behind her back, a long braid of fiery orange hair moved. Her clothes were too big on her. Her white khaki pants with lots of pockets seemed to be falling off her thin frame. They were held up by a belt with 3 thin kunai on it. They were longer than normal ones, but thinner and might be faster to throw. A green tank top was her favorite shirt. It was the only thing that fit her body well, but since it was only half shirt, it showed off her belly. Naruto couldn't tell what kind of knife she was carrying because it wasn't well lit. It was on her right arm. Her headband was the only part of her outfit that stood out. The medal has a picture of a half sun blocked by a crescent moon. She was from a village that Naruto didn't know. Naruto asked, "Who are you?" A name would help him figure out who she was. She laughed. "My name is..." She stopped and put her finger to her mouth, making a sneaky face. "Maybe I shouldn't tell. You might squeal on me for cheating." Naruto didn't like where this was going, so he asked, "Cheating on what?" "Why, on the second part of the chunin exam, of course." She laughed, making her smile even bigger. "But then again, the only way you could tattle is if you live." Naruto took a step back to be safe and asked, "What do you mean?" Suddenly, he really wanted to use his Hyakurai to make a nice, loud thunderclap that would wake up the whole neighborhood. She replied, "There's only one way to cheat," as if she were not talking about anything important. "The only way is to kill the participants before the start of the test." "Sorry, but I don't like your way of thinking." "Aw, that's bad. It looks like I won't be enjoying the next few minutes." I heard Naruto yelling in his head. She held up her hands and said, "Well, okay, let me rephrase that. I'm only killing particulars. Basically, the people who threaten me." He raised an eyebrow and walked slowly toward his kunai pouch. It seemed like Senbon wouldn't help him in this fight. It was going to be much worse than his fight with Haku. Naruto asked, "What? Afraid of me?" As a joke and to find out more. "Don't get me wrong," the girl said as she sighed, "it's nothing personal like that. I don't fear you, or any of the other competitors. But there is such thing as feeling threatened. If that's true, aren't you threatened by Gara or some of the other stronger competitors?" She laughed and covered her mouth, as if she knew something that no one else did. "Silly, why would you think I'd feel threatened by them? I'm in a league of my own. They could never hope to touch me. I'd shatter their minds before they could come within a foot of me." Naruto laughed and told her, "That's a little cocky." With a sideways tilt of her head, she shot back, "It's not a matter of arrogance. It's a matter of truth. I admit, Gara would give me a run for my money, he might even push me to my limits. But he could never beat me. Then why me? I'm supposedly the weakest genin in the group. If that's true, silver eyes, I'll eat my sandals, she joked with a sly grin. He didn't like her already. She poked him and seemed to be able to see right through him, but he couldn't figure out why. But she seemed so erratic because she was acting so fancy when she was about to kill someone. He woke up when she said, "But I guess I should answer your question of, why me?" "It's simple," she said about his eyes, "you're like me. I knew it the moment I saw you freeze those students. I was curious about you at first. I had never seen an elemental bloodline limit before, so I followed you to see more. Imagine my surprise, though, when I followed you during your game of tag with that girl and found out about your eyes." Shit. In his mind, Naruto yelled and used a lot of bad words that would have hurt Anko's feelings. He stepped backwards again, his eyes wide with shock. She smiled sneakily and pointed at Naruto as if to accuse him. A limit that copies other limits. A limit that can create other limits should the person come into contact your blood. That's a sign of a transcendent bloodline limit, one of the three great Dojutsu. The Kyokugen, the creator of all the other limits in existence. Naruto was shocked and asked, "How? How do you know that?" As she took off her welder's goggles and showed her closed eyes, she laughed. She spoke as she slowly opened them. "I know because I have the third one." She looked at him after that. Even for a bloodline limit, her eyes didn't look right. It looked like her irises were pearly green and changed color as she moved. They also rippled when she moved. She stopped sounding silly and said, "Look into my eyes. They are the Genzume, Mirage Eye, Lit. Phantom Image Eye." Naruto couldn't believe what he saw and asked, "What?" He looked at another transcendent limit. It was hard to believe she was there, staring at him with the ugliest jujutsu. She closed her eyes and asked, "Don't you know anything about the other transcendent limits?" "Sorry. I would let you look at them longer, but it's hard to control my Genzume. Effectively, I'm blind, otherwise if I open my eyes, let's just say that people that have tried to hurt me have turned into vegetables." She thought of something while putting her finger to her mouth. "Wait, you named the unnamed great Dojutsu? That's cool. I like Kyokugen. It's very fitting." Naruto asked in a nervous voice, "What do you mean?" She asked, still dreaming with her eyes closed, "You don't know the legend?" "Well, I'm not surprised. Iwa does keep better track of history than any other of the great shinobi nations. After all, this is a bedtime story for all the kids in Iwa, or at least from what I could remember last." Naruto was interested now. He had never heard of his limit's history before, but now he saw someone who did. He had always wanted to know where his limit came from, why it existed, and why he had to be the stupid one to get it. It had been there since the day he named it. "Tell me," he asked. "Well, that's rude," she stated, "but I suppose I could indulge you since you're going to die. Better to pass away knowing what kind of power you hold." The girl took a big breath. There were 3 brothers. Nothing was special about them, but they were close. All of them were together no matter what. Naruto held on to every word as if they were tips on how to kill himself. In Konoha, this story was as real as it could be, even though it came from Iwa. One day, as they were tending their fields, 3 beings came to them. The 3 claimed to be the gods Tsukuyomi, Susanoo, and Amaterasu. Of course, the 3 brothers thought they were lying and told them to go away, but the gods refused, saying they had brought gifts for them, depending, though, on what they wanted. Thinking this was a joke, the older brother stepped forward and said that he wanted a way to bring peace to the world. Joining his brother, the middle one said in a joking voice that he wanted to be able to make people's dreams come true. She stopped the carrot top for a second to gather her thoughts, but it was short. But the youngest brother kept quiet. When the gods asked him what he wanted, he said he wanted to give people gifts of their own. His voice wasn't sarcastic like his brother's, and his request sounded sincere. This made Amaterasu feel moved, so she went up to him, poked him in the finger, and let a drop of blood fall into his eyes. Susanoo did the same thing his sister did, but he grabbed a piece of dust and poked his older brother in the eye. He went up to the middle brother and breathed into his eyes. His cool breath made the middle brother's eyes water. Tomorrow, Amaterasu told the brothers, "You'll receive your gifts." Thinking it was a joke, the brothers walked into their home and fell asleep. When morning came, that was when their eyes changed. The oldest brother's eyes became the rippling eyes, the Rin'negan, while the middle brother's eyes became the misty eyes, the Genzume, and of course, the youngest brother held the unnamed silver eyes. Later, the eldest brother became the sage of the six paths, creator of ninjutsu. The middle brother became the sage of the water moon, creator of genjutsu, and the youngest brother became the sage of the silver tears, creator of all of the bloodline limits that exist today. He asked, "Is that it?" "That can't be all of it. There are endings to stories, they don't just stop." This story was meant to be for kids, and parents were telling it to their kids to keep an old legend alive. "There is more," she said, waving her hand, "but I'm afraid that if you want to learn it, you'll have to beat me. Unfortunately, it'll take millennia before you can touch me." Naruto yelled, "Try me." His eyes broke naturally and turned the blood red color of the Sharingan. He needed a way to see through the illusions if this Dojutsu was good at them. "Fool. Do you think that something as weak as the Sharingan can track me?" She was joking. The girl slowly opened her eyes, and as soon as her eyelids crossed over her pupils, he could no longer see her. Naruto quickly looked everywhere, but his red eyes didn't find anything. Not even footprints. Since his Sharingan didn't help him find her, he used his Kyokugen's limit sensing instead. He frowned because he didn't feel anything. He did, but it felt like it was snowing or raining on his radar. His disappointment was that he couldn't see her. "What's wrong with my Kyokugen?" he thought as he looked over the rooftops. Then he felt something grab his feet. When he looked down, he saw that it was a tree branch quickly going up his leg. He reached for a kunai and tried to cut it, but it just went right through it. He finally cut himself on the leg because he thought the pain would break the illusion, but it didn't work. Naruto was desperate, so he changed his limit. His eyes went from being red to being Aruka's. As he charged up and let out a flash of lightning, electricity danced around him. The lightning broke the branch illusion and made the girl's invisibility go on and off. Then she slowly stood up and turned clear again. "What a powerful limit," she said. "It's also a little dangerous if I come too close. How about I fix that?" Naruto's eyes were shocked by a flash of light, and the next second he was thrown onto the roof of the building next door. Taking deep breaths, he slowly rose from the crater. But then he felt another hit, which sent him crashing into a railing. He jumped to the other side of the roof and used his Hyakurai to look around him before another of whatever those were hit him. He smiled as he felt the bioelectricity of her. The thing was hard to hide, even if it was just a trick. It was full of lightning when Naruto charged his hand. When his enemy got close enough, he slapped them, sending a wave of power at them that made them scream in pain and shock. She stopped being invisible for good, and everyone could see her. The girl held on to her heart as she felt it skip a beat or two. She then jumped to the side as Naruto ran at her with his arm cocked back. When she looked at the ground, her eye flashed with chakra, making a wall of fire in front of her. He jumped into it because he thought it was just another illusion. But he burned his hand and had to jump backwards. Naruto quickly saw that her eyes were glowing again and jumped out of the way as a stone hand rose from the ground to choke him. He quickly pulled out a kunai and threw it at the stone hand. When he saw that his gun went through the hand without making a sound, his eyes got really big. All of a sudden, stone hands appeared everywhere. He landed, but two hands grabbed his feet and tripped him into a small garden of them. Several of them held him down, and one of them choked him. He was so desperate that he charged up as much electricity as he could and sent it through the roof, not caring if a few light bulbs inside blew up. All the hands disappeared right away, and a girl who couldn't be seen fell off the other end of the lightning rod. Naruto stood up and pulled out a kunai. He threw it at the girl, and before she could stand up, he hit her with a huge arc of electricity. A loud boom broke the silence and lit up the night. The girl's body wasn't anywhere to be seen in the charred roof crater she had left behind. Just as he looked up, she fell from the sky with her switchblade open. Before Naruto could jump out of the way, she suddenly appeared in front of him and cut him on the arm. He then jumped backwards. He saw that her switchblade was actually a butterfly knife when he jumped back. Shinobi usually trade switchblades with gangsters who think they can use knives, but most of them were useless, just like all other switchblades. He didn't understand why this girl would choose such a useless weapon out of all the thousands that were out there. She was very good at playing with the gun. She switched the blade in and out and messed around with the brightly colored handle. He moved closer as she slowly walked toward him. As she got closer, Naruto changed limits and looked back at Sharingan. At that very moment, Another tomo was added to his eyes, making the area around him clearer. That didn't make him feel better, though. The girl got closer, and Naruto saw what was going to happen when she attacked. She's going to try to cut my left shoulder. The moment he moved to block her attack, his right shoulder was cut open. His Sharingan knew she was going to attack him in the stomach before he could do anything. Like before, he tried to jump backwards, but instead of cutting himself in the stomach, the bridge of his nose broke open and blood poured out. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt someone cut a long line through his back and push him forward toward no one. He then felt someone cut down from his left shoulder to his right thigh. On his knees, he spat out the blood that was building up in his mouth. Eventually, his chest hit the roof, which made it even harder for him to breathe. "Sorry, it looks like I win," said a voice that he disliked just as much as Sasuke's. If Naruto looked up into her pearly, wavy eyes, he wanted to slash out her precious Genzume even more with each second. "Look on the bright side, I'll tell you my name since now you won't be able to tell anyone, speaking that you were going to die," she said triumphantly. "My name is Shizuka Komoruda. Remember it when you see the Shinigami." She raised her butterfly knife, but before she could lower it, her wrist was wrapped in something that looked like a rope of white stuff. The last thing Naruto saw of her was a shocked look. His body had lost too much blood by then. He passed out after one more second. He rubbed his head and groaned. When someone dropped a big whale on him, it felt like the whale had been slammed against him over and over again until all of his bones were ground into dust. He had to say that was the most uncomfortable nap he could remember. A voice told him, "You chose the worst fight possible. You do know that, right?" Naruto only moaned, "My head." "Take this," the voice said. At that moment, the blonde was so lost that he couldn't tell his own behind from his head. He put out his hand and grabbed what felt like a cup of water. There were a few pills in his other hand, which he could feel. Without a doubt, it was aspirin. He didn't have a hangover, but this was much worse than one. Not that he knew what a hangover felt like, though. After downing the medicine and water, he rubbed his head and felt better because his goggles were over his eyes. This person would find out about the Kyokugen otherwise. In most situations, Naruto would try to stay away from strangers, but this guy seemed nice, and none of his senses were working right. He took a moment to figure out where he was. All he could see was a world slowly coming into focus from the blur. He was only aware that he was lying on a bed, a nice, soft, fluffy bed. He thought about what had happened on his adventure through Konoha the night before. He barely remembered what he said to the Kyuubi and how he got into a fight with Shizuka. Everything felt like a bad dream. Like any other nightmare, it seemed so far away now that he was awake. He said in his head, "Bad dream," as he rubbed it again. "Well, that wasn't really a dream," the stranger said. "The person you fought was Komoruda Shizuka, a genin that hails from Hakubogakure no Sado, the village hidden in the twilight, a small shinobi village between Iwa and Kumo. Unfortunately for you, you fought a very dangerous genin." Naruto moaned, "I'll believe you," and then rubbed his eyes. "What time is it? Where in hell am I? Why do I feel like shit, and why do I keep feeling a sense of vertigo?" The stranger said, "It's 6 minutes to 7. And to answer your second question, you're in my hotel room. Your racket last night was loud enough to wake me up from my beauty sleep, and since I couldn't fall asleep again I decided to investigate. To answer your next 2 questions, stick around." Naruto joked, "Do I really have much of a choice?" "Well, not until your senses correct themselves, which may take anywhere from a couple minutes to a couple hours, but they should be fine by the time you head to the chunin exam." Next, the genin could hear a low-level fire technique and smell cigarette smoke. However, because his senses were stronger than most, he knew the smoke was coming from a pipe and not a cancer stick. His vision was so poor that he could barely tell that he was in a white motel room. The figure sitting on the bed next to him made it even worse. He knew he was still fully dressed because he could feel it. Still, that dizziness wasn't going away yet. Naruto told the guy, "Okay, spill the beans. How the hell did she pull half that crap?" The man laughed, which made the cigarette smoke fly toward him even more. One of those flavored smoke things or something like that, he could smell a hint of peppermint in it. Or the peppermint was probably just mixed in. "Sorry," the man said. "It isn't very often I smoke, but once in a while I do when I need to calm my nerves. Anyways, for starters, all that happened last night was an illusion. The scars you got, everything. If you feel around, not even the fabric of your clothes have been ripped. Also, think back to the battle and how even though she kept hitting and slicing at you, the Hyakuri couldn't shock her for some odd reason. Naruto's clothes did not show any signs of wear, just like he said they would. And he did remember that even though she touched him, she never got shocked unless he tracked her down and charged his electricity to cover a large area. If what the man said was true, then all of his pain and blood that was spilled was just a complicated form of genjutsu. Naruto felt uneasy about the thought because he knew that branch of the ninja arts could be so dangerous. That part of class, especially when he talked about how to get out of the optical illusions, he might have done better to pay more attention to Aruka. The reason for this is because, he continued, the Genzume is aptly named. Its most effective ability is to create illusions so powerful that they can't be broken by normal means, hybrid genjutsu if you will. And the most dangerous part is the fact that whatever happens can come true. It's so great that had one of her illusions made a lethal blow, it would have killed you because the mind would have been fooled into thinking it actually happened. The only way to truly counter it is to strike the person behind the illusions, which you did every time you hit her with a blast of electricity. Naruto's eyes were starting to focus, and he could see that the person had something big on their back. Their hair was wild on top, but long enough to tie back in a decent sized ponytail. The man told him, I have a question for you. Ever heard of the Kurama clan? Naruto turned his head away. Not really. I wasn't expecting you to have. The man took a big drag from his pipe, sending more smoke with a peppermint scent into the air. They're a clan from Konoha that specializes in genjutsu that, at first glance, seems as powerful as the Genzume genjutsu. This is far from true. The Genzume has a whole arsenal of abilities that put it in a whole different level, thus why it's called a transcendent bloodline limit. The boy before him spoke up and cut him off. My turn for a question. How do you know so much on transcendent bloodline limits? Shut up, brat, and I might tell you later. Believe me when I say I'm a lot older and I know more than you. Naruto didn't like this guy at first. The man emptied his pipe of the burned tobacco and peppermint for a second and then put it away. Now where was I? Ah, yes, now I remember. The Genzume has an arsenal of abilities, and unlike the Kurama which have just an unusual brain, Genzume users have an unprecedented nervous system which is needed for the illusions to be woven. Their senses are 10 times greater than an average human, putting them on a pedestal as trackers greater than an Ibarum and Inazaka, and an IQ and thinking capacity just as great, if not greater, than your friend Shikamaru, who I believe to be the most gifted Nara born in a couple generations. They also have some of the greatest reflexes and balance on the planet, and I swear to the gods I'm not joking. Walking on wire comes as natural as breathing for them. Naruto said, damn, impressed and envious that his Kyokugen didn't have anything as cool. Yeah, it gets better, the man joked. Those abilities alone make Genzume users pretty dangerous, but their eyes have more uses than just projecting illusions, which is what really sets them apart. Never look directly into their eyes, otherwise they can get into your head, pick out information they want and then use it against you. Skilled users can even read your thoughts should you look them in the eyes, but I doubt Shizuka has that much skill yet. She's good, but not that good. Naruto let out a sigh of relief because he knew his secrets were safe. For now. He didn't need information about his Kyokugen getting out that he didn't want to, like its weaknesses and other things. His secret about Kyuubi was still safe from everyone else, which made him feel better. For sure, though, he would have to be 1,000 times more careful if he fought Shizuka again. But he needed more information. Everything had a flaw, even the strongest limits had a spot where they could be reached. Naruto looked up and asked, what else? As he watched the ceiling slowly shine through. I'm not done explaining her eyes. The other reason you never look into a Genzume user's eyes is because they gain the advantage and you end up having to play by their rules. This is because they get control of your senses early, which is a must in the art of genjutsu. Once that happens, they have free reign to do whatever the hell they want. Why do you think you feel like shit? Even though she wasn't able to kill you, she was kind enough to leave you with a parting gift of screwed up senses for a couple hours at the most. But if those were just dreams, Naruto said out loud. Then. He stopped himself before he said anything about his Sharingan. Could a Sharingan work against her, or even a Byakugan? The man laughed out loud. I highly doubt it. If Shizuka was smart, she would have studied on the Sharingan and the Byakugan to figure out how they work. Then she'd be able to play with them like any other human being, only with the added spice of humor at the sight of them not knowing what the hell is going on. Like I said, her genjutsu is at an unreachable level, so strong it isn't hard to fool other limits. That did make sense. She only knew how the Sharingan worked and how to use its powers to her advantage. It felt too much like controlling a marionette, and it would be easy to push someone into a corner and then kill them quickly. He thought about Shizuka a lot, and she seemed stronger and stronger. That also helped him understand why his Kyokugen couldn't pick up on her. She didn't fully understand how his eyes worked, but since it was a sixth sense, she was in charge of it last night. She could have used it to her advantage, but luckily she didn't. But there are some flaws, the man said with a smirk. Naruto looked at his fuzzy form as if he were getting free ramen for life. The most hyperactive ninja in the world was now paying attention. Those are also pretty dangerous. You did notice that she was wearing welder's goggles, right? Naruto asked, his head back and forth. The only time those come off is when she needs to use her eyes. Otherwise, if she didn't keep those on, she'd go blind permanently. The senses Genzume users pride themselves on are their very weakness. Loud sounds, too much pain or pressure on the body, too much light, powerful smells, all of that makes them as fragile as expensive fine china. Which also brings up another point. They need to make eye contact in order to bring their genjutsu to full effectiveness, but this is a problem, especially during the day when it's bright out. Also, they're prone to electricity because it messes up their nervous system, the very basis for their entire limit. I want you to keep this in mind. I have a feeling this won't be the last time you meet Komoruda. Naruto could now see who this strange man was because his senses had returned to normal. He wore a big scroll on his back and had white hair. His headband had two small horns in the kanji character for oil on it instead of a village symbol. He had red paint coming out of his eyes, and his clothes looked like they would fit a traditional kabuki dancer. The blonde got up and moved to the edge of the bed. He stretched and worked out the knots that Shizuka had made in his body. But it wasn't nearly as bad as when he first woke up. He still felt dizzy. She used a strange weapon, I think a butterfly knife, Naruto said as he popped his back. Why would a shinobi want to use such a useless weapon? If used correctly, any weapon can kill, the man said. The way she used the balisong only added to the effect of her genjutsu. That, and I noticed you made eye contact a couple times when you were following the weapon movement. For her, the knife has several uses, which is probably why she chose it to have a fancy color. Oh. Naruto stood up and popped his neck, but then he had to sit down and hold his head because he felt dizzy. Sorry, but man. She messed up my senses good. Just a few more minutes, the man stood up and said, before you're fully recovered from your fight. The Kyuubi's healing abilities made it to where you recovered in merely an hour and a half, instead of several hours like I bet she was hoping for. When Naruto heard the word, inner demon, he stopped moving. He then rubbed the back of his hand in shame and said, hey, wait. Oh yeah. You would know about her since you're probably from around here. The man asked with a sexy grin that didn't seem to go with the rest of his face. It's her. Do describe. He pulled out a pen and notepad with a smile on his face faster than the human eye could follow. No one would have thought that a woman would be the worst demon ever. The man asked her if she was hot or not. Naruto made a face and turned away. I hate her. She keeps trying to take over, and she keeps messing with my emotions to do it. As he put his notes away and sat back down, the man said, oh. And even though he was a pervert, he knew there were some things he should take seriously. He thought it was a very bad thing to play with someone's feelings, and if the Kyuubi was that eager to leave, he could only feel bad for this boy. The man said, sorry, I didn't know, and then he folded his arms. The only thing I can say is to avoid feeling darker emotions, such as anger, jealousy, fear, and anything else like those. Naruto raised his head and looked around. Why? Because it gives her a foothold. When you're really feeling bad, she could probably manifest outside your body in some way to tempt you. Because of your connection to her, though, you'd probably be the only that'd be able to see her. The blonde didn't feel better after that. It was only possible for him to feel angry, jealous, sad, or anything else bad if he wanted to give the Kyuubi the strength she wanted. He felt better after thinking about it. At least he had pretended to be a silly, happy person. At the same time, it kept his bad feelings hidden from the world, himself, and the Kyuubi. In spite of that, she knew him better than anyone else and made the most of it. There was no doubt that he would give in at some point over time. As soon as he felt a hand on his shoulder, he looked up and saw a friendly smile on the stranger's face. You got it rough, and trust me when I say that I could never handle half of the crap that you've probably gone through. But look at it this way, it could be worse. What about Gara and how he ended up? That could have been you. Naruto's lips were shaped in a sad smile. It was possible for things to get worse than they were. He would have turned into a ghoul if not for Sasaki, Sakura, Aruka, Haku, Kakashi, Anko, Yamato, Sarutobi, and all of his other loved ones. It was important for him to do his best to keep the Kyuubi away. The man stood up and walked over to a chair next to a table full of who knows what notes. He sighed and smiled. Now, I need to get back to work and I believe that you have to head out and get ready for the chunin exam. He smiled and said, yeah, thanks. He liked this person. He didn't know what it was that made him feel like he knew him, but it did. He smiled at the man before he walked out the door. Hey, I never got your name. When he looked up from his notes, the man smiled. It's Jiraiya. The name's Uzumaki Naruto. You might want to remember it because I'll be the next Hokage. Well, be seeing you. He turned and walked out the doorway with one last wave of his hand, but he missed Jiraiya's shocked, wide-eyed face. In the middle of the hall, Naruto stopped because he had an idea. There was no way for Jiraiya to explain how he knew so much about transcendent bloodline limits. He just kept moving with a shrug of his shoulders. He was just going to have to keep that one of those things a secret. He was having ramen for brunch because it was too late for breakfast and too early for lunch. It was time for Ayame to ask for another bowl, so he leaned against the counter. Quite often, he would drink a lot of them all at once. Naruto was scared even as he ate. There was no doubt in his mind that he and Shizuka would fight again. The only difference was that he had a chance this time. Not looking into her eyes was all he had to do. If he did, it would be murder like last night. The hits he did give her were just luck because she didn't know how Hyakurai worked. Next time, she'd be better prepared. He put down his food to think about what she said. The Genzume, the Kyokugen, and the Rin'negan were known as the three legendary devil arts. He thought for a moment about what the Rin'negan was like. The Genzume was very powerful and had many skills. He let out a grumble as he thought of another danger, Gara of the desert. The scary ghoul with the red head was probably just as dangerous as Shizuka. One of the most dangerous limits was Jikaiten, though not as much as the Genzume. You never knew what else he was hiding. He let out a sigh when he thought about how everyone was after him. At least Lee was a nice guy, he was active, but nice all the same. Ino, on the other hand, was just plain annoying, and why was she so set on having a rematch when she didn't even acknowledge his presence at the academy? Naruto wasn't sure if Neji was out to get him, and he hoped that the Hyuga wasn't either. It looked like the Auto team didn't like him, but it looked like they didn't like anyone. What does a normal Kyokugen user day look like? If so, could I trade lives with someone else? As the counter hit the wall, Naruto turned to the side and saw Ino smiling, ready to fight. He groaned to himself. He didn't need this crap right now. Ayame let out a sigh and moved deeper into the stand. You could tell Naruto was already under a lot of stress, and adding the blonde pig to the mix made things even worse. She wondered how the boy with the whiskers lived so long. Naruto asked, "What do you want?" As he slurped up the last of his 7th bowl of ramen. With a sly smile, Ino asked, "How about we end it right here, right now?" She meant for everyone to know that she was better than him. We wouldn't have to fight during the chunin exam since by then we'll know who the loser is. He replied without taking his eyes off his bowl of ramen, "Please stand at the back of the line. I've lost track of how many people want my head, and the last thing I need is to worry about you." Huh? Ino asked with a smart tone. What do you mean, stand at the back of the line? I've been standing at the front for God knows how long. Let me look at it from the point of view of the two people who really want me dead, Naruto told her with a sour face. Gara, the guy from Suna, has threatened to feed me to his sand on several occasions. And just last night, a girl from Hakubo, or wherever in hell that place is, attacked me and actually came close to killing me. Right now you're pretty low on the people who want to kill me list. Because Ino didn't say anything, Naruto was afraid that he might have hurt her brain by accident. Sometimes she tried to think of something to say, but all she could do was shake her head and think again. After being quiet for 5 minutes, Ino finally spoke up. You're being serious, aren't you? Naruto gave a quick blink. That took you 5 minutes to figure out? She asked. He gave her a thumbs up but didn't seem impressed. Great job, genius. Because of that, he got a one-way ticket to the dirt from Ino. In the grass, he could have looked up her short skirt by accident, so he made sure to keep his eyes off of her. If the sarcastic remark got him a black eye, he couldn't imagine what she would give him for saying she thought he was gay. Okay, I probably earned that one, Naruto said as he rubbed his now swollen eye as he crawled back to his seat. He was glad that most bruises went away in 5 minutes, which was probably because of the Kyuubi. Ino told him, you can be a real jerk sometimes. I try, Naruto smiled and told her. It's fun, especially when I do it to piss off my sister. Sister? Ino asked with a raised eyebrow. He put his chopsticks up to his chin for a moment to think. Yeah. Well. Actually, she's not really my sister, but we're so close that we just call each other brother and sister. Anko may be crazy, but she's there for me. When Ino thought out loud, oh, she looked confused at the idea of calling that person a sibling. What kind of person could Naruto put up with? She had heard terrible things about Anko, what she did, and what might have happened to make her that way. Without being poisoned, no one should have been able to stand less than a foot away from her. People felt bad when they were around Anko, but she would quickly respond with a threat that no one knew if she would keep. She thought about Naruto and the way he lived, though. It was like everyone in the village looked down on him and never paid attention to him, like they hated him and wanted him to go away. He and Anko both didn't have parents, brothers, or sisters to lean on. They both did strange things to get as much attention as possible and were shunned by everyone in the village because they were different. In the same way, they were people. Compassion was something that people wanted on their own. But they didn't have it, and no one would give it to them. As kids, they never got to taste the thing that everyone else did every day. As Ino thought about it some more, she looked sad. As a Yamanaka, she knew a lot about psychology and how people's feelings affect them. Because of this information, she was able to figure out why they stayed together. They had to be together. Even though the world was mean to them, they kept going with a little hope. They couldn't hold on to anyone else besides each other. When Naruto saw that Ino's skin was getting darker, he became worried right away. Hey, sorry about what I said earlier, but you know, it's been kind of stressful. We'll have our match soon, but when, I couldn't tell you. She shook her head. It's okay, she said. She sighed and said, I'm not worried about it right now. I'm just thinking about things. Naruto smiled and asked, want a bowl of ramen? It always helps me out when I need to think. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Ino blinked her eyes a few times and then shrugged, which made Naruto smile. What kind do you want? Surprise me, she said. As Sakura ran quickly to the Forest of Death's Gate, her katana, which she named Bloody Rose, swung behind her. When she got to the area, she saw a lot of genin getting ready to go into the forest. They were all carrying items and weapons she didn't recognize. She pointed out a few teams. Team 10, which had Shikamaru and Choji waiting for their teammates to show up, was one of them. She huffed as she stopped in front of Anko, who was moaning and rubbing her head while saying something like, too much alcohol. Sasaki was leaning against a tree. She tried to say, sorry, but Anko cut her off. Can it? She asked in a tense tone. The second part of the exam doesn't begin for another half hour, and right now the teams are just getting their scrolls. Speaking of which. Right on time, Sasaki took a scroll out of his bag. He told her, we have a heaven scroll. Sakura thought to herself, okay, but what's it for? Anko told her, give me a second, while rubbing a sore spot right below her eyes. Naruto isn't here yet, so you'll have to relay the info to him. You have to get the counterpart of the scroll, the Earth Scroll, in your case. In order to pass. You do this by, here, she mumbled and groaned about, damn hangovers, before continuing, you do this by stealing it from the other teams. By what means you do it, have fun, it's a free. For all. You could even kill for one, but that'd be a little extreme. Keep in mind that other teams can steal yours as well, and there is no limit to how many scrolls you can have. His older sister left while yelling for someone to get her some aspirin before she lost it. A bunch of chunin ran like chickens with their heads cut off to get the crazy Junin her medicine before someone died. Sakura and Sasaki watched. Anyways, Sakura said as she turned around to see her crush. Do you know where Naruto is? Sasaki turned his head away. I don't have a clue where Goggle Head is, and neither did Anko. She said he wasn't home when she woke up. If that jerk doesn't show up. Sakura said through clenched teeth. They both heard a pair of ninja sandals, which cut her off. When she turned around, Sakura was ready to yell her head off because she thought it was her teammate. What she saw instead was a skinny girl with bright orange hair and a pair of welder's goggles that looked a lot like Naruto's water goggles. He stood up straight and looked into her welder's goggles. Even before they met, he didn't like her. She seemed cocky, but she also had a power that seemed to back it up. And you are? Sasaki asked the newcomer as he slowly moved his hand to his kunai. She spoke to them in a silly voice and held her hands behind her back. I would go home if I were you too. Sakura had her hand on Bloody Rose and was about to pull out her katana to cut this annoying girl. Why would that be? She asked. She told them, because your teammate Naruto isn't going to show up, and she loved seeing the shock and confusion on their faces. Sakura asked in a dangerous way, how would you know that? As she pulled out her katana. For a short time, Sasaki didn't understand what the girl was talking about. He pulled out a kunai to attack her and asked, what did you do to Naruto? She talked to them as if she were talking about something as ordinary as the weather and said, oh, I just got rid of him for now. Unfortunately, I couldn't kill him like I originally planned, but I did put him out of commission. Sakura yelled at the girl, you what? And gave her the evil eye. Sakura and Sasaki were both very angry. Sasaki asked, who do you think you are? To answer the first question, she said with her arms crossed, I merely nullified his senses, and sadly for you, it won't be until the late afternoon until they return to normal. He probably can't even stand up straight right now. And to answer your second question, I'm someone that's stronger than you, and that's all you need to know. Long story for A. She said, and before Sasaki could answer, she was behind him with her balisong around his neck. She put the knife to his neck and drew blood. The next second, she came back out in front of them with her knife folded up. When Sasaki put his hand to his throat, he was ready to feel blood between his fingers. He didn't feel anything, like she had never touched his throat. The thought that what had just happened was all a dream made his eye grow bigger. She told them, like I said, I'm stronger than you. Shizuka. A familiar voice called out. Sasaki and Sakura smiled, and the girl's eye twitched in anger. She made a face as she turned around and saw Naruto walking up to them, looking mad and annoyed. He stopped about 3 feet away from her, and they looked at each other. Sakura got tense because she could feel Naruto and the strange girl's killer intent going through the air. There would probably be a lot of blood if they fought. Sasaki could feel the killer intent too, but he didn't say anything about it. He just raised an eyebrow. They had met before, and Naruto wasn't happy about it. Shizuka wasn't happy either that her plans had been thrown off. Naruto was the first to speak up. You're a lowlife piece of sh*t, he said. I wasn't expecting you to be here so early, she told him, still being silly even though her original plan had fallen through. I didn't expect you to be up and walking after last night. Yeah, well, bad things do happen, Naruto replied calmly. Let's just say that I heal quickly. Even then, you would have been a worm feast had the old fart not intervened, she said. But still, when our paths cross again, I'll finish what I started. Keep thinking that. They looked at each other through their goggles to get a sense of each other. Naruto knew what Shizuka was weak at, but she also knew the one limit he needed to use against her in their next fight. Smart, sneaky, and dangerous, she was she. It was the worst thing for a shinobi to fight against. Okay, break it up. Anko stepped in and stopped them from trying to hurt each other. After getting the aspirin she needed, she seemed to be in better shape than a few minutes ago. Save the fighting for the forest. Shizuka moved to leave with a grunt, but before she did, she went up to Naruto and whispered something in his ear. She told him in a low voice, I won't tell anyone about you, Silver. Eyes, but I'll still kill you. He told her with a smirk, you still owe me the ending of the story. Shizuka laughed out loud. She got up and trotted off, smiling silly as she went to where her supplies were. Anko and Team 7 kept an eye on her until she disappeared into the group of genin. As soon as she did, Anko went around the small group of genin that were nearby. Anko was calling the kettle black, and Naruto was about to tell her, that girl is weird. But his sister finished the thought for him. She's a one-man team, and the only genin to ever come here from Hakubo. I think you guys should be a little cautious around her. Why would she be the only one on a team? Aren't squads made up of 3 genin and 1 junin? Sakura wanted to know. Because sometimes in the smaller hidden villages, Anko said, sitting down on a nearby rock, Sasaki and Sakura could tell she still had a headache. There aren't enough genin or wannabe ninjas to make a ninja academy or squads like we do here. So, some of them pair up a junin with a genin to make an apprenticeship, but the chances of the genin passing the test are much lower than what you guys had, not even 70%. Sasaki asked, how often do some of them show up for the test? He was becoming more interested in this Shizuka. Anko said, I only see one of these genin once every couple of years. And now that we have done our history lesson, time for me to address another issue. She got up and walked over to Naruto, who gave her an odd look. He thought someone was blamed him for something he didn't do, but he didn't know what it was. He was punched hard to the ground before he could do anything. When Sasaki and Sakura heard that their teammate's sister was mad at him, they jumped. Anko yelled, where the hell were you this morning? Naruto shot back, holding the lump that was starting to form on his head. Becoming best friends with Shizuka. What? Anko asked, shocked that the girl's name had been brought up. Yeah, she. An intercom yelled, attention, all genin. Please get to your positions, the exam will begin in the next couple of minutes. We'll talk about it later, Anko told him as she left. Satoshi said, I believe we should go to our gate now that the junin has left. Naruto stood next to his friends and looked into the forest of death. Team 7 was ready, but the gate hadn't opened yet. Sakura told him in a few words what they needed to do. Not too hard at first, but after giving it some more thought, he knew it would be a problem if they got in touch with some of the stronger teams. He broke his eyes into many pieces and turned them the milky white of the Byakugan. He hadn't used the limit that Hinata gave him yet, but he thought now was the best time. He would know right away if there were groups trying to hurt him. It might also give him a few seconds to decide if Shizuka was going to go look for a certain boy with whiskers or not. She took a deep breath and looked out into the forest. It would be clear to anyone else that she was scared. She didn't want to let down Naruto or Sasuke, and she wasn't sure how useful her Kinzokudan would be. If she had enough chakra, her newest attack could be very dangerous. That's why she touched the soldier pills she bought that morning in her holster. If she ever got into a tight spot, all she had to do was take a pill and attack. She hoped it would never come to that, though. Even though Sasuke didn't show any emotion, he was feeling pumped up. He was probably even excited. This was what it meant to be a shinobi. A buzzer went off, and the gate opened at that very moment. Team 7 took the lead.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.